It's episode 2.
Hey, it's me, Comfy T, and welcome to my Shoujo Weekly Recaps, where I'll be sharing my favorite stories from anime. The story takes place in a world where Umbra are monsters or fairy tales born from human fear and anxiety. A young girl arrives to study abroad in modern-day London, only to be caught in a bizarre incident as she enters university. In a city with no acquaintances, the helpless girl wanders into Cafe Forbidden, a mysterious cafe that houses a group of handsome men known as the Twilight, guardians designated to protect the boundary that the humans in Umbra convene. But it's here the girl learns the ring she inherited from her great-grandmother who lived 100 years ago had ties to this place. After arriving at the London airport, Beilu Ton changes into her school uniform while
Ford. God damn! And you have Renaissance. Wait, I should do that. Oh, damn, I forget. Ice cream.
her friend, Mu Xinyao, uses her app to navigate to their apartment. However, it told her before she even asked for some reason. Ignoring that though, Beilu is excited her dream of coming here finally happened. Riding the train, Mu mentions that tomorrow, they need to buy basic necessities and register for school. There's only 2 weeks until the entrance ceremony, so they'll be really busy preparing. However, Beilu ignores her to marvel at the city of London, a place her great-grandmother had loved. Beilu was thankful for Mu as well, since she was the one who gave the push for studying abroad. The two were the best of friends. Arriving at their stop, Beilu twirled within the city that was so cool and old-fashioned. But as they began heading to their apartments, little did they know something transparent was following them from behind. Almost making it there in the evening, this thing swipes their luggages and Beilu's ring from right under them. Mu couldn't see it, but Beilu could for some reason, so she chased after. Along the way, Beilu shouted, "Thief!" and for someone to catch the thing, but wondered why no one was responding. The thing ran through an interesting man who caught the ring that was stolen from Beilu, and thought of the thing as an annoying, uncivilized beast. Then, when Beilu rushed by, he hinted at his familiarity towards the ring. Reaching a dark alleyway, Beilu only realized now she'd left Mu behind. So, she wrote on a piece of paper and casted a spell that would guide her after 6 throws of it as a paper plane. She followed it into a cafe, walking through a magic mirror, where Vlad caught it. Vlad wanted to know who she was, but more importantly, how she was able to cross the mirror. Then, after further inspection, Vlad's eyes glimmered, knowing this girl must be related to Regen. But then, Luke chopped the back of Vlad's head, telling Vlad to decide if he's interrogating or seducing her. Toryu then introduced himself, and welcomed Beilu as the descendant of their lord Regen. With the cafe closed for the night, the cafe workers learned Sha Regen was Beilu's great-grandmother. Beilu was surprised to hear they knew of her great-grandmother since she passed away nearly 100 years ago. Vlad was about to reveal how he felt remorse for not being able to protect her back then, so Luke had to quickly make an excuse saying Regen was the first owner of this cafe. Luke then showed Beilu a picture of Cafe Forbidden with Regen standing front, claiming she opened this cafe so misfits like them from all over London could work here. Now Beilu understood why this spell had guided her here. Luke then introduced the 3 of them a little more. He opened with Vlad as a lazy guy who couldn't do anything except make tea. Then Toryu, who was also from China just like Beilu, and then himself, as the super chef and backbone of the cafe. After the intros, Beilu explained her situation, describing her teeth as blurry and fuzzy. Now saying it out loud, she assumed she wasn't making much sense. However, they all knew exactly what she was talking about. The 3 boys determined it to be a goblin, which tend to infest the city around this time of year. And learning the general location where the items were stolen, they knew of the city park where a goblin den may lie. So, they went on their way to Hyde Park. Without explaining much to Beilu at all, Beilu caught a taxi to follow, and running into the park, she came across Hazen, who pointed her in the direction of where the 3 boys went. But before she could take off, he gave her back her ring, and told her to wear it so she doesn't lose it again. When she caught up to the boys, Vlad stomped open a tree that held various stolen items and revealed a goblin out of its invisibility. However, it wasn't just one. It seemed there was a family of them. Vlad then took off, leaving the small fry to his two friends. Luke became wolf-like and tore the goblins apart, while Toryu summoned a Gatling gun and started shooting at the tree. Watching them take out the goblins was a little much for Beilu. Vlad then found a Spriggan leading the goblins. However, Beilu's call out to Vlad distracted him into getting struck. She tried to create an opening for Vlad to escape, and then with Toryu and Luke arriving on the scene, they told her to flee. But, touching her shadow, the ring began to glow, and she suddenly pulled out chains. Vlad told her to use them with intuition, so she threw them and they entangled the Spriggan. This gave Vlad the opportunity to strike from behind and eliminate the monster completely. Luke found Beilu's luggage with her scent, but right now, she was overwhelmed. Who were these guys? What were these powers she possessed? This was all too much. So, Vlad stared her in the eyes and overwrote her memories. He told her today she arrived in London, where thieves stole her luggage, and the police helped take care of things. She found herself sitting on a park bench in the morning, and excitedly explained her police chase to Mu. Back at the cafe, Luke questioned if changing Beilu's memories was the right call, but Vlad insisted Rijen wouldn't have wanted her great-granddaughter to get involved with Twilights like them. She should be a normal girl living her school life. However, arriving at her apartment, things were not at peace, because as Bailu opened her door, she heard the sound of a breaking window and Mu screaming. Ah! That's the sound of me screaming when someone doesn't like this video and subscribe to my channel. Look, on my Shoujo Weekly, you can find plenty of stories involving action, romance, and drama. Ooh, I love the drama. You can also talk about anime with me on my live streams, where I'll sometimes sing and do other cool things. So come on, hit that subscribe, I'll be your guy. As the news blares about people disappearing due to a modern-day Jack the Ripper, Luke and Toryu are about to head out for the day. Luke questions if Vlad still has Beilu on his mind, since he's been in deep thought for the past 2 hours. However, Vlad denies this. He then begins stripping, because he's decided to nap, but he wasn't expecting Beilu to run in and stumble onto his chest. Beilu was having an emergency, although Vlad thought she should apologize for touching him first. But she just completely ignored him, explaining her friend Mu was kidnapped. With yellow tape, the police and a crowd of people surround Beilu's apartment. Luke and Toryu confirmed the truth in her claims. Beilu was getting antsy, wanting to rescue her friend. She bumped her head into the mirror and learned she couldn't just leave whenever she wanted. Vlad told her to let his friends handle this, since they were more capable. More importantly though, he wanted to know how she remembered him. When she thought back to their faces being close together, she got flush red. It was clear Beilu had no clue, so Vlad hypothesized it to be a property of Rijen's blood, or maybe the shock from Mu getting kidnapped. The reason didn't matter anymore though. He decided to ask for all the information she had on Mu so they could track her down, and the fact that Vlad disregarded her feelings on her attempted memory wipe really annoyed her. Back at the apartment, Luke flagged down the active detective who knew him, and inside, Detective Gregory told the two to hurry up before people got suspicious. Gregory knew the kidnapping wasn't the work of a human, given the kidnapper escaped with the victim through the back window on the 4th floor. The scratches on the building are nothing Gregory could report to his superiors, but he did suspect the kidnapper to be a wolfman like Luke. Regardless, the detective thought of it as strange to be the work of a shadow. Why would a shadow act in the middle of the day? Why would they go after a foreign student who just arrived in London? Outside the building, Luke and Toryu determined this was not the work of a goblin or a Spriggan, since the shadow seemed to be more intelligent. On the other side of the phone call, Vlad assumed the commotion caused by the goblins made them notice. Bailu asked what had been noticed, only to be answered by an unfamiliar boyish voice that said, "That you've arrived in London." Bailu was surprised. However, Vlad told Wayne to stay out of this. Wayne didn't think hiding things would help the situation. He tried to explain to Bailu only for Vlad to hang up. This didn't stop Wayne though, as he began speaking through the radio. He was apparently a ghost that haunts Cafe Forbidden. Vlad and Wayne explained that non-human entities like themselves were called Umbra. Some people refer to them as shadows. They're born from human fear and anxiety, like a child who woke up during the night, imagining demons or monsters from the shadows of their room. the monsters are born there. Luke is a descendant of the werewolves from fairy tales, though currently he's a lone wolf broken away from the pack. Toryu is a Jiangshi, an undead corpse from Chinese folklore. After coming to life in China, he accompanied Rizhen here and has been around since the 19th century. Wayne apparently is even older than that, but his memory and existence is hazy, which is why he doesn't have a physical body. 6 months ago, Vlad picked him up while he was just a consciousness inside an abandoned doll. Then, as Vlad began to proudly explain what he was, Beilu got a phone call from Mu, which they had already known was confiscated by the police. On the other side, they told her to locate Mu as soon as possible. While Haezin was having dinner, we learned he had Chris kidnap Mu to awaken Regen's blood inside of Beilu. However, Chris didn't like what creature Haezin had stuck Mu with, and when she woke up, unable to recall being kidnapped, a mannequin sliced her cheek. In the evidence lockers, Gregory called Vlad in, because he couldn't enter buildings without being invited. Vlad needed Mu's phone for something. Back at the cafe, Beilu was irritated because Vlad left her in his room. She didn't know much about Umbra or shadows, but judging by his room, she thought he was a total shut-in. She freaked out, wanting to search for Mu, and then wondered what this interesting thing was in the center of the room, until her phone rang. Where the boys were at, they had Wayne unlock Mu's phone. Inside, Wayne found a magic mirror app that's designed to predict a person's thoughts based on their usage and conversation history to give them advice. But then, Wayne noticed Beilu was using her app to track down Mu while she was being attacked, making them wonder if this app was the work of an Umbra. Wayne then made a call to Beilu to tell her to escape, but above, she heard Mu scream, then a pillar fell towards her. Mu was backed into the wall, with the mannequin ready to kill her, but Beilu was able to hold down the mannequin as they fell down the stairs together. She narrowly dodged some throwing knives and threw another mannequin to distract the assailant. Beilu continued to run, but got caught off guard as the attacker jumped at her from the side, pushing her off the upper floor. But luckily, she was caught by Wayne. He tried to pull her up, but his hand slipped off because he was just inhabiting another mannequin, so she fell into some cushions. The attacker jumped down to meet her, and noticing her phone ringing, Beilu rolled away from another knife attack and picked up her—
Nah, man. Hello, how are you, cutie? You remind me of my wife when she was in sheep form. My wife is a sheepkin. Well, used to be. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to her. Ever since the bridge incident, I have no fucking clue what happened to her.
phone inviting Vlad in. He swarmed in through a gust of bats appearing before her. He then caught a knife attack and revealed the mannequin to be Jack the Ripper, the serial killer who once terrorized London. He pushed Jack away and revealed himself to be Bram Stoker's exquisitely crafted Count Dracula. With Jack going for another attack, the Count quickly hit him with a barrage of blows and blew Jack back all the way through the building. And outside, Chris appeared and finished Jack off for trying to kill Mu. He then apologized for scaring her and swore to protect Mu from now on. Outside, the protagonists found Mu nowhere in sight and contemplated on what to do next. Back at the cafe, Wayne played an old film detailing Rijan's history. Known as the strongest Umbra hunter, she became internationally famous after she fought and killed Count Dracula. But isn't that Vlad? She was accompanied by a powerful Jiangshi, and while she could have been every Umbra's worst nightmare, her philosophy was different from others because she sought to coexist with the Umbra. A world where humans and shadows could eventually coexist peacefully was the guiding principle for Rijan and the Twilight's organization she founded with her allies. She established Cafe Forbidden so humans could become accustomed to Umbra, and if Beilu wanted to learn more, she could always check Rijan's study on the top floor. However, Beilu couldn't keep up. Learning her great-grandmother was the leader of such a questionable organization, Vlad clarified that their organization wasn't bad, because unlike 100 years ago, they now have international
Oh, look at that cutie. I don't give a...
support with ties to governments and law enforcement in various countries. But just like there are those who seek harmony between humans and Umbra, there are those who only seek prosperity for the Umbra alone, and sow confusion amongst humans. There are many who hated Rijan as well, thus making Beilu their target. Learning this weighed on Beilu, given her best friend was kidnapped because of her family lineage. To cheer her up, Luke then provided her some spaghetti, because who can think properly on an empty stomach? He and Vlad then began bickering, because there's garlic in it, and well, Vlad is a vampire. Rip. Supposedly though, he hasn't drank blood in the last 100 years.
I remember one thing. My teacher told me that if I tell the principal I was a vampire, I could get extra credit. So I did do that, and the principal responded with, "Throw away this pizza," because he was eating a pizza, and the pizza had garlic on it. I didn't know it had garlic on it. And he was like, "That was a test." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Arguing nutritionally it's no different than seawater. Elsewhere, Chris was serving Moo the same kind of spaghetti. The guy who taught him only cooked by feeling and ratio, which is Asian style, by the way, I would know. So he assumed she wouldn't like it, but she enjoyed it, being so hungry. Outside the cafe, Luke comes out to comfort Beilu, given she hasn't slept in 2 days. She tries to play it off by saying her jet lag disappeared, but Luke knows she still feels at fault for Moo's capture. He knows the more others protect her, the more it hurts. The more she's told she's not responsible, the more she feels responsible. Beilu was taken aback that Luke was so understanding. He understood she wished people would leave her alone, because all the attention makes her want to tell people she'll decide for herself if it's her fault. She wondered if she could really interpret this as him trying to cheer her up, instead of just trying to hit on her though. To which he eagerly replied, "Of course. I don't go after weakened girls. The real battle begins once you've recovered," making her giggle. He then promised as a friend to rescue Moo. However, Beilu was determined to rescue her herself, causing the two to laugh together with the mood lighter now. That night, Vlad looked outside. Spotting Luke running in wolf form, he scurried onto a rooftop to cry out under the full moon, and this perked up Chris's ears. The two brothers then met in front of a Ferris wheel, where Moo watched them from the inside. Chris had promised to release Moo in exchange for Beilu, but of course, Luke wasn't gonna hand her over. Luke questioned why Chris was getting humans involved, considering they were exiled by their fellow wolf kind. Luke didn't see it that way though. He felt they were only exiled because of their ties to humans. He didn't hate humans though, just Luke.
Oh fuck! He's gonna try to kill me. They're dangerous. I'm fine. They're really dangerous. I'm fine. Oh, run. Dragons are really dangerous when flying. We don't even accept your food. I wouldn't know.
The two began fighting. Luke offered his brother peace and to come to the cafe, but Chris still refused. About to continue the battle, Luke suddenly found himself surrounded by enemy Umbra, but this was not Chris's intention at all. He wanted Heishin to stay out of the way, but Heishin wanted this useless battle to end so they could go back to trying to capture Beilu. He commanded the dogs to attack, but then they suddenly got wiped out by a bullet barrage, courtesy of Toryu. Beilu then got in front of Luke to say she wasn't going to let him get hurt any further. Chris then went on the offense, but got deflected away quickly by a shield Beilu pulled from her shadow. Vlad then made it to the scene, explaining that even though Luke tried to lose them and deal with this on his own, Vlad's bats used echolocation to track down their howling. Now Vlad and Toryu planned to handle the grunts, while giving Luke the chance to go all out on his brother. Beilu went to search for Moo, who shouted out near the top of the Ferris wheel. Luke refused to kill his brother because he loved peace, but this is the very reason Chris thought they should all die. He believed Umbra would trouble the humans, and no matter how many times Luke offered peace, Chris refused, unwilling to accept the Twilights. He climbed up the pillar of the Ferris wheel chasing after Moo. Vlad attempted to rescue her, but Chris was just a bit faster, taking her and escaping across the water. In battle against the Jiangshi known as the Ultimate Weapon, Ri-Zhan easily defeated and subdued him with a talisman. She didn't want him to continue harming others and harming himself. He turned back to Moo, being pulled onto a boat by Chris. Oh, she's having a romance plot with her captor. That's where this is going, huh? He even got her a cute hat, and began taking her to a secret hideout no one knew about since he couldn't trust Heishin anymore. But Hae-jin was always watching. Back at the cafe, Beilou was studying hard in Rijan's old room. She went downstairs to take a break, since it was getting late, detailing her overwhelming study of folklore from all places and ages, and historical weapons. To help her relax, Chris served her a vanilla ice cream affogato, making Vlad jealous since he had already served her tea. She enjoyed the coffee ice cream thoroughly, but Toryu found her behavior problematic. He told her spoons shouldn't be held in her mouth, and her hairstyle and clothing wasn't presentable in the presence of others. Rijan always dressed properly and held a graceful presence. The other boys then jumped in, adding Rijan was proper even in battle, acknowledging Beilou looked the same, but her behaviors were totally off. And this embarrassed her into frustration so badly, she fell off of her chair and knocked over her glass. Toryu caught her, but unfortunately the glass broke under his immense grip. Getting up, Beilou panicked, seeing Toryu's hand, but he attempted to downplay any issues, since technically he was just a tool. Still though, she chose to bandage his hand, but Toryu felt bad for the stain on her outfit. Thus, the two decided to go shopping together. While the two went on their little date, the boys decided to spy on her via a drone Wayne controlled. As the two walked together, Beilou asked about the talisman over Toryu's face, and he explained that Rijan gave it to him, so he could control himself. But he couldn't see through it at all. Beilou was quite surprised, but Toryu didn't like that she looked at him that way with a face that resembled his old master. And man, were the boys back at the cafe cracking up over this. Then suddenly, some shadow birds came to attack, so Toryu quickly shot them into nothing. More came, so he continued shooting, but he was caught off guard when a bigger one picked up Beilou. Then, a flurry of birds rained down on him and pinned him down. Beilou was rescued by Luke and...
Okay, I'm sealing up the hole because it looks ugly, and it's basically useless. Maybe I could make a little cavern with... Well, shit.
Lab. The twilight's getting in the way was always troublesome for Hae-jin's schemes, but this wasn't going to stop his plan for Toryu to revert back to his old form. Luke freed Toryu, but noticed his talisman burning away on the ground. Toryu then went feral, with his wounds healing and now firing at his friends. As Vlad took Beilou away, he explained Toryu was an Umbra weapon designed to rampage behind enemy lines before eventually exploding. He'll attack anything that moves. Vlad was worried about Beilou using her powers to solve this, since it came at a cost, but they were in need, so he told her to imagine what she wanted and make a strong wish. The ring should respond to that. They eventually led him to an abandoned warehouse, where Beilou gave Luke a new talisman to suppress Toryu's powers. Placing it on him, Luke narrowly escaped a grenade thanks to Vlad's help, but the talisman failed, so she had to make another one with a different wish. They tried again with Vlad using his Chinese martial arts to clear the way for Beilou, but unfortunately, she tripped, giving Toryu clear aim at her. He stopped momentarily seeing his old master, giving Beilou the chance to place the talisman right on him. He remembered that time when Rijan gave him solace. She had known Hae-jin created him with the purpose of being a weapon, but she just didn't see him that way, and neither did Beilou. The memories made Toryu shed a tear. Beilou didn't think of him as a weapon, but instead placed a talisman that gave him a heart as a friend. So back at the cafe, as friends, Toryu was determined to help her change her clothes? Oh, he was just trying to fix her ribbon. He wanted to help her with matters concerning her appearance from now on. Later, they gave Beilou a store outfit, but she wasn't just an employee there. They made her their manager, which was certainly a shock to Beilou. Two boys entered an abandoned hospital, exploring with the rumors of it being haunted with a ghost. They then heard a sudden crack.
I love urban explorers. I want to go urban explorer sometime.
And with a glowing pumpkin coming their way, they fled screaming. It was thrown by Chris, who wanted to keep the place abandoned as their hideout. But the pumpkin started moving, becoming an umbra through the imaginative fears of the two boys. With the little jack-o'-lantern hiding out of fear, Moo approached it, telling the little umbra not to be scared and take her hand. Chris warned her, though, that nothing ever came good from Umbra and humans associating with each other. At the cafe, Vlad read the newspaper headline of famous singer Roland Lee being hospitalized due to a romantic scandal, until Beilu came out twirling in her new manager outfit. Vlad scoffed at her, so she scolded him, saying he's supposed to compliment her even if he has to lie. In response, claiming this was a lie, he told her the outfit looked good on her, and that she's supremely beautiful right now. But still, she felt acknowledged. Beilu then explained her parents wanted her to go to school in China, but she defied their wishes by coming here, and she wanted to pay for her own tuition anyways. But she didn't know what a manager did. That's when Vlad explained her duties are interacting with customers, setting tables, shopping, taking out the garbage, and washing dishes. They then served a guest for the day, who knew the secret password to enter the private room behind the mirror. Beilu served her first customer, Lydia, who wanted the Twilights to help her find a gentleman who could make her heart flutter. She was confused, since they were supposed to handle requests involving Umbra, but that's when Vlad came in to explain Lydia was in fact a Yenonshi. Beilu then took on the job, feeling romantic requests were wonderful. Oh man. Well, Lydia left her preferences of tall, with well-defined features, enjoys an occasional drink, possesses talent and passion for arts, and blood type 0. However, the boys explained in Irish folklore, Lydia is known as a fairy lover that enters relationships with humans. It is said they offer wisdom and beauty to young artists, poets, musicians, and writers. But the men—
I'll take her, I'll take her, I'll take her, I'll take her, I'll take her. Come here. Sorry, that was just instincts.
devote themselves to her will only find madness and death. So unfortunately, Beilu just took on a job to help Lydia find the perfect victim. She wanted to now turn Lydia down, but also unfortunately, it's their cafe's policy to not reverse any jobs they accept. So, Vlad knew just the man who fit Lydia's desires. We moved to Lydia's request completion date, where the crew invited Detective Gregory. He laughed, pleasantly seeing Lydia's beauty, but quickly turned displeased, realizing she's an Umbra. He got up quickly because he had to head back to work, but even he knew that from every fairy tale in the world, Umbra and humans could never be happy together. This one didn't work out, but Wayne was determined to find her a new match. Everyone tried cheering Lydia up, until the famous singer who was hospitalized came into the shop, already knowing who Lydia was. In the changing room, Wayne explained he searched all the images to find a perfect match based on her description. They're apparently exes who've been dating for over 5 years now. Roland was at a loss because she suddenly left him, but she didn't want to hurt him anymore. He didn't care about what the tabloids said about them, but he was misunderstanding. She just didn't want to take his life. She then ran out of the shop and Beilu went after her. Back inside, Roland spoke of how the two of them had met before he was famous. They fell in love together at first sight, and he was so surprised she suddenly wanted to end things. Outside, Beilu realized the reason Lydia wanted a new man to fall in love with is so she could stop hurting Roland. Even if they were apart, as long as they loved each other, she'd continue to passively sap his vitality. Lydia knew it was wrong. Not only did she fall in love with a human as an Umbra, but she never wanted to take his life. She asked Beilu to kill her and end it all, but Beilu still wanted to find another way. Lydia was willing to accept this, but only if Beilu would kill her if her plan failed. Beilu tried researching in Rijan's study, but when the time came, there was still no solutions. Then, Vlad came in with Roland, who was informed from all the boys about what kind of creature Lydia really was. Lydia slapped Vlad for interfering, but Vlad accepted this as a man first and an Umbra second. Lydia then ran out with Roland chasing after her. Beilu wanted to help, but Vlad told her not to, asking her if she ever had something more valuable than her own life. That's the situation Roland was in now. Roland caught up to Lydia, trying to embrace her as she tried to push him away. Before learning the truth, he thought she just didn't like the media, so he was willing to even give up singing for her. But even knowing her existence was hurting him, he didn't care. Even one more minute, even one more second, he just wanted to be with the woman he loved. Dying right in her arms, he told Lydia he'd love her forever. But then, Beilu arrived to fulfill her promise. Roland wanted to die loving her, but instead, Lydia sacrificed herself with her last words being, she loved him forever and ever, as she faded into a dust of light before his very eyes. Later, Beilu sat depressed at the table under the weight of her decisions. She didn't regret her actions, but wondered still if there was a better answer. There was still some light to this, with Toryu explaining the tool Beilu had used was one that transformed Umbra she wanted to save into amethyst, which was now a jewel Roland would always wear on his ring finger. The two cannot communicate or see each other, but the souls can always be together. This was the best thing Beilu could have done for them. Beilu then asked if it was really so difficult for Umbra and humans to love each other. So, Vlad told her not to worry about it, and instead came in for a kiss, telling her she could try for herself. But he was just playing, and that left her flush red. The story of Roland ends with him performing his new hit single, Fairy Lover, where he expresses his emotions, first meeting Lydia as a street performer, and going everywhere with the woman he loved. In another location, Van Helsing was using security footage to spot a pumpkin Umbra, a wolfman in the reflection of some bottles. He then commanded his assault team to organize for departure in 15 minutes. To try figuring out where Chris had taken Moo, Beilu was researching urban legends with Wayne's help. The two came upon the little pumpkin wearing Moo's hat, so now they knew where to find her. Moo was feeding the pumpkin spaghetti, and as Chris was about to eat, he suddenly got up realizing they'd been surrounded. The Twilight Boys were arguing about how to deal with Chris, until they noticed a helicopter fly towards the building. Seeing Moo and Chris get taken away, Luke went after them, but he couldn't reach. Vlad tried pursuing with his bats, but was thrown off with an anti-radar shaft. He wondered how the captors had known about his bat powers. Reaching base, Van Helsing told Moo she'd been brainwashed by the Umbra, and told her he'd save her. And later, Van Helsing tortured Chris. But with Van learning his organization's ally Hae-Zin was the one who made Chris kidnap Moo, he wanted Chris to explain everything he knew. Chris was fine with it, as long as Van promised Moo would be safe. Van responded that it'd be no issue, because his organization, the Midnight Sun, was designed to protect humans. Back at the cafe, the gang was trying to figure out who took Chris and Moo. Wayne figured with the expensive helicopter and resources, they must be involved with the Magic Mirror app. And that's when Van Helsing walked right into Cafe Forbidden. They were wondering who he was, so he introduced himself as a man who's fought beings like them countless times throughout history. He's Van Helsing the 13th. Van explained to Beilu that Umbra were first properly recognized during World War I, where the humans fought due to confusion caused by Umbra. His organization, the Midnight Sun, was founded on the idea of purging human society of Umbra and exterminating them. However, after the World War ended, the world began to desire harmony towards Umbra. The Twilights gained power and Midnight Sun fell into the minority and hid underground. Van Helsing considered that a humiliating time, but in the past 3 years, he established Snowmary, the company that created the Magic Mirror app, then poured all the technology and funds he acquired back into Midnight Sun. He did apologize for his technical involvement in getting Moo kidnapped by Chris, and promised to return her. That evening, Beilu asked Vlad if they could really trust Van, since he promised to give Moo back on the condition she never returned to the cafe or deal with Umbra ever again. Vlad could never trust him, but he knew Van Helsing was incredibly loyal to humanity, and Vlad was willing to let Beilu go if this would allow her to live a normal life. At an abandoned warehouse, Van called Luke to come out. He knew Luke had been following him the entire time. Luke came alone since he didn't want to involve anyone else. He just wanted to know Chris's location. The two began to fight, with someone watching them from a drone above. Chris was wary, dodging the silver bullets knowing they could really harm him. He eventually caught Van by the neck, but this was all going according to Van's plan, because above them dropped Monk's Hood, also known as Wolf's Bane. It's poisonous to them. With Chris struggling to move, Van fired a decisive shot. Toryu, having gone after Chris, got a message from Van to come alone. The two then engaged in a fight at the warehouse, where Van struggled because a doll like Toryu had no real weakness. But firing a shot from his cane, Van released a container holding liquid nitrogen, freezing Toryu solid. This means Vlad was the only one left who could fight. Beilu is let in by security, where Moo has been held up in the Snowmary Tower, and the two have a heartwarming reunion. Vlad then took his offensive stance, which Van recognized as Chinese martial arts. He knew the art's philosophy was developed so the weak could defend themselves against the strong, and was disgusted a creature as powerful as Vlad would use it. Vlad corrected Van, stating that as a vampire, he still had many limitations and weaknesses. Then,
this is what happens when cookies catch the greeniest wave.
Ready to dive in? Hershey's Cookies and Cream.
From above came a Holy Cross spear for Van, one of the exact weaknesses Vlad was referring to. Back at the Snow Mary Tower, Moo explained since being here, she's been treated kind and courteously with a clean bed and plenty of food. Before hiding out with Chris, her meals and sleeping conditions were crude, but she felt much safer then than she does now. Hearing that, Belu told Moo it was time to get out of here, with Chris as well. She told the guards this, and Backup, who was observing the entire operation, was getting quite annoyed from all the work he had to do. Belu wasn't allowed to leave until Van finished eliminating the Twilight Umbra. However, Belu had complete confidence in her friends, and using Wayne, who was on her phone, she breached the door's security and made her escape with Moo. Backup suspected something like this would happen and reported it to Van, but Van told him to use his head and figure it out. This frustrated Backup enough to hang up and let Van finish his fight on his own. It didn't matter though, since Van had already pinned Vlad against a wall. Just kidding, Vlad seemed to be doing just fine, minus the blood dropping. He was aware Van's puppeteer had now abandoned him. He figured Van's boss from above had been observing and analyzing the fight, while always providing him the best strategies and weapons. Van was irritated, shouting that he's his own boss, leading all of them, to which Vlad clapped back with, "Nah, you're a puppet. It's sad. Your predecessors are rolling in their graves." Vlad then pulled out the spear, and was perfectly fine, causing Van to panic a bit and ask Backup for assistance, only getting no response. Down below, Luke and Toryu had just finished cleaning up, having freed themselves from their precarious positions earlier. Van had made the mistake of leaving his underlings to deal with him, since they weren't nearly as strong or as talented as he was. Back at the Snow Mary Tower, the girls were having Wayne locate Chris, who was still captive in the 4th floor basement, and unfortunately, they were on the 85th floor. Luke then called Belu, and received a map from Wayne so he could rescue Chris and the rest of them. But before Wayne could return to Belu's phone, he got locked in the server he was hacking by Backup, who trapped him with an antivirus program. Backup then deleted Wayne, blocking off any additional guidance. Security then started banging at the door, so it was time for Belu and Moo to use the escape route Wayne left them. As they were chased through the halls, Belu used her ring to summon a rock wall to impede the guards. The girls continued their run, and a streak of Belu's hair suddenly became red. Luke made it to Chris, who had basically no desire to escape. Chris believed if he stayed, Moo would be able to live a normal life. However, Luke told him that was nonsense, and convinced Chris to hear how Moo feels about him before he makes a decision like that. Vlad smacked Van Helsing with a flurry of attacks before laying him out. Van accepted his defeat, and asked for an honorable death. But Vlad had no interest in dealing the final blow. As Vlad left, Van began tearing up and shouted, crying at his shameful defeat. Belu busted through a door using her powers, but it was exhausting her. They made it to another room, where Backup began firing lasers at them. However, he wasn't expecting all his PCs to suddenly blow up. They were saved by Wayne, but he didn't seem like the innocent boy he was before. This new being was much more devilish, and explained he erased Wayne's memories and hid within his mind. His true form was known as the demonic Lord of Gluttony. The building began crumbling all over because of Wayne, so Chris slugged Luke to avoid falling debris, and Luke leg sweeped Chris right back to avoid the next set of rocks. But really, they just wanted excuses to hit each other. Belu got up after much of the building's destruction and found Wayne back in her phone, perfectly normal. She was so worried about him. They then got a call from Luke, who was relieved to hear she was safe. He passed the phone to Chris, and hearing his voice, Moo was glad as well. There was no peace, however, with Hazen entering the scene. He revealed himself to be the mastermind who orchestrated Moo's kidnapping to attract Belu. Seeing him through the phone, Luke told the girls to run because they stood no chance against him. He then jumped through the window and began climbing up, but Belu tried to combat the man anyways. He commended her strength having grown accordingly, and summoned Jack the Ripper to deal with him. It looked like Jack was going for Belu, but that was just a ruse because his real target was Moo, and after getting pierced, she fell from the building where Chris caught her. Enraged, Belu dragged Hazen into Jack and started thrashing him as he laughed over her fantastic power. Falling over from defeating him, Vlad was able to catch her. Down below the tower, Chris was relieved that Moo was alright, but she couldn't stop crying over the death of the little jack-o'-lantern. She held it close, and for some reason, a vapor came from the pumpkin and healed her wounds. Beilu woke up to the boys looking at her, and she was exhausted from the power usage. Luke then came in after chatting with Chris, giving her the good news that Moo was safe. However, everyone was surprised to hear she didn't remember who Moo was. Outside the room, the boys were all trying to figure out what was wrong with Beilu. They concluded that due to the traumatic stress of thinking Moo died, her brain must have rejected her existence to protect itself. Beilu wondered why her body felt so heavy. She
That is a possible thing.
still had something important she needed to do and wanted to get up, but then wondered what that important thing was. She already finished enrolling into school. Was the important thing managing the cafe? No matter how hard she tried to think, it was no use. So she decided to rest some more. Later in the day, Vlad decided to take a break from work and visit her. He touched her hair and told her she could lean on him and his friends, and that he'd stay with her no matter who she becomes. Beilu got up, wondering if this was a confession. However,
So we need... Why do I have a new recipe when I've been gathering this wood for around 2 days? Real life days?
poked her head, telling her she was a century too young. Then, Luke took his break to visit her as well, giving her some dessert to eat. The two chatted, and Beilu assumed Luke was asking for relationship advice, when in actuality, he was explaining a metaphor for her having lost her memory, also hinting that he liked her at the same time. She wasn't interested in his advances and decided to lie in her sheets, making Luke want to flirt more, but it didn't really work. Toryu visited Beilu next, giving her some new clothes she seemed to enjoy. He then brushed her hair, and this gave him flashbacks of his old master. Later that night, Chris and Moo were running away from pursuers. They got into a taxi where Chris told the driver to go anywhere as fast as he could. While riding away, Moo touched Chris's leg for comfort, but with the driver's magic mirror app going off, Chris ducked down with Moo, realizing their location had been found. He then told Moo to get out of the car and ran away, and Backup was annoyed his plan had been seen through. Heishin then arrived, still recovering from his fight with Beilu. Backup showed Heishin footage of where Van Helsing was struggling and cursing Vlad's name, but he didn't mean to show that screen. He meant to show Heishin the interesting footage of Mu Shinyao's powers in action. Backup wanted to wager against Heishin. Who would get stronger, Mu or Beilu? In a hideout, Chris could smell their pursuers had found them, so now they'd have to go somewhere else. Sitting down, he wondered why Moo was giggling, and turns out the jack-o'-lantern she absorbed was wishing her good luck. She then told Chris they should go to Cafe Forbidden. She believed that was their best shot, since Beilu had always helped her when she needed it. In the morning, Beilu woke up, realizing she had no time to waste. She came downstairs in her manager's outfit, thanking everyone for helping her, but she was ready to help Moo again. Doing his rounds outside a museum, a security guard is surprised to find one of the exhibits outside for some reason. Then, hearing a beastly sound, he is startled by a chimera-like beast behind him, and a flaming demon that came out of a lamp, so he ran, shouting for help. Backup asked Heizin why he was scaring random Englishmen, but turns out he was just at the museum to create and retrieve more Umbra from the ideas of the creatures within the exhibits. Backup then reiterated it was his Mu versus Heizin's Beilu, and whoever makes their pawn stronger gets to have both of them. Their philosophy...
Bro, let the chimera be okay, please. I love the
on
chimera.
how they wanted to train the two girls were different, however. Heizin wanted Beilu to grow from throwing encounters her way, while Backup wanted to grow Mu by capturing her and training her independently. Detective Gregory entered Cafe Forbidden, but no one was happy to see him since they were hoping it was Mu. Gregory was taking it like, what did I do? I'm just a customer here. But really, he wanted to know why the entire area was surrounded by men in black. Luke then explained they started showing up after Chris called him, saying he and Mu were finally coming to the cafe. Their phone lines had been tapped, and despite Luke and Chris only speaking in Wolf, their messages were deciphered. Gregory then got a sudden work call, notifying him of monsters being spotted at a museum. So, the gang went over and Vlad immediately erased the memories of all the guards who had seen the Umbra. That way, they could continue their normal lives. The Night Umbra then appeared, so they engaged in battle. Beilu used her chains to pierce it immediately, and after taking the Umbra out, she collapsed. The next day, the Twilights found out Backup's men were swarming the town of Camden. Now knowing that's where Chris and Moo were, Luke used his howls to call his brother to a hidden location, that only the two of them were familiar with in that area. So now, they were on their way to save the two. Chris and Moo decided to wait near their meeting spot, and despite all the trouble, Moo was actually having a lot of fun right now. To her, it was like she was finally getting to see London, so she brightly thanked Chris for showing her around. Chris got a little shy, but told her once this whole crazy situation was over, he'd love to bring Moo back here, and she accepted his promise. At night, the Twilight crew split up, and Wayne shut down Backup's surveillance. It would take some time until Backup could have things running again, so now was their opportunity to regroup. But along the way, Vlad and Belu encountered the Chimera. Vlad didn't want her to keep using her powers, but she took the beast head-on anyways, all while Hazin was watching them from afar. After Belu defeated it, Vlad got a call from Luke, because he and Toryu needed backup against the Genie Umbra. Unfortunately, while this was happening, Moo and Chris were surrounded by Backup's men, who poisoned Chris with Wolfsbane. Moo didn't want Chris getting hurt anymore, so she gave in. But as they began taking Moo away, Chris tried to stop them, but was shot with silver bullets and he fell into the canal. Moo called out to Chris, but she was soon knocked out and taken away. After the gang finished off the genie, they were unfortunately too late, only seeing the helicopter leaving and Chris's blood all over the floor. Moo found herself in a dark room, where Chris told her everything was fine now, and there was nothing to worry about. However, this was an illusion via Backup's new version of the Magic Mirror app. He's sending false data not just to her vision, but to all 5 of her senses. And in her mind, she was embracing her wolf boy who wasn't there. The Twilight Gang decided to hide out in a secluded location where there was no internet connection. They needed to hide from the midnight sun, otherwise, Belu would end up fighting and exhausting herself further. They knew if she kept using the ring, she'd eventually turn into an Umbra. Back where Moo was, she saw her jack-o'-lantern, who Chris told her had died protecting him. But little did she know, she had the Flame Genie constrained in front of her. With Chris telling her to save her pumpkin, she began absorbing the genie into her, exactly what Backup wanted. We turned to Vlad checking on Belu, who was eager to save Moo if they knew where she was. Vlad asked her to take off the ring, so that way she could power down, rest, and her hair would go back to normal. Belu objected to the idea though, because if she did, she'd lose all her power she built up and would have to start over. Vlad then told her that Rijan had said the same thing once. She was a hero who never stopped fighting for the happiness of others, even allowing herself to become an Umbra because of it. And this resulted in her ultimately disappearing from everyone. Now, she was just a small legend that remained in the memories of only a few. Belu wanted to know about how Vlad really felt about her, but since it was nearly 100 years ago, he claims to not exactly remember. But he does remember regretting his inability to save her, so that she could have been happy too. Belu didn't believe her grandmother would have wanted that, and such a desire would have only made Vlad happy. She was tired of being compared to Rijan. She was tired of Vlad using her to rewrite the regret he felt from his experiences with her. But even so, he didn't want to lose Belu
Okay, I think I could make strip logs for the floor instead of rock. Or whatever this is called. I think we could make a stripped oak. Would be very nice.
Now, he even kept his promise to Rijan and forbade himself from drinking blood, but he would lift that restriction and use his powers to control Belu if it meant that he could save her. Belu then challenged him. They both knew he couldn't beat her right now, especially with him weakened for not drinking blood for the last 100 years. He was distraught from her combative words, and she apologized, but she then ran out, wanting to be left alone, slamming the door into Luke's face on the way out. Luke then met with her later, placing a hat on Belu so she could cover her Umbra hair. He explained with Vlad's mistreatment towards her, Toryu and Wayne were punishing him as they speak. The two began talking about Moo, and Luke told Belu to let him and the rest of the Twilight Gang handle her rescue. He wasn't telling her this out of a sense of childish possessiveness like Vlad was. He just genuinely wanted Belu to have a happy college life with Moo as a human, for the two girls to visit the cafe as humans, and for all of them to be friends forever. He would like for Belu to bridge the gap between humans and Umbra. The two then came back, and Belu apologized for running off. She wanted to apologize to Vlad as well, but he was out buying groceries. Back in the illusion of the magic mirror, Moo was surrounded by more Umbra. Chris told her to save them and grant them peace, so she absorbed every single one of them. Backup was ecstatic. He'd never seen a human who could merge with Umbra so completely. Hazen spoke of this phenomenon being more common years ago, with shaman who could merge their consciousness with Umbra. He suspected that, like Beilu, Mu might be related to Shah Rijan or himself. For the two men to part ways, Backup desired to use Mu to erase all Umbra from this world, while Hazen desired to capture Beilu and acquire the power of all Umbra. So now was the time for their two pawns to fight, where the winner could truly take all. And with Vlad showing security footage the word "tonight" as a challenge, the two knew this night would be their opportunity. The Twilight crew had their last meal together before the final battle. Beilu was so happy to have some peaceful fun with her friends. At night, they saw a message on the side of the house that said, "Tower of London." So they began heading there, but by himself. Vlad asked Wayne to take care of Beilu if all else failed, as his true self, the Lord of Gluttony. At the Tower of London, Backup and Haishin were prepping the area with plenty of Umbra. This place had a long history of wars and executions that had been conducted, probably the most cursed place in the city. As Mu descended down onto the floor below, Backup laughed at his praises towards her, believing no one could stop the monster he created. The Twilight crew began heading to their destination by boat. They met with Haishin at the entrance, who summoned his horde of Umbra to surround them on all ends. The boys began clearing a path, but no matter how many foes they defeated, the enemies seemed endless. So, Toryu decided to go in and blow the door wide open for them, and throw some grenades to clear a path for his teammates who came running through. But now that he had done his part, it was time for him to go all out by removing his talisman. Beilu, Vlad, and Luke kept running through, quickly moving past all their enemies. Getting to a more secluded path, Luke could hear his brother calling out to him, so he split up from the group. And inside another room, he found Chris passed out on the floor. With Luke checking up on him, Chris thanked his brother for choosing him over Beilu, because this was all a trap to get Luke out of the picture. That Chris was merely an illusion set forth by Haishin, who knew Luke couldn't resist saving his brother. Beilu asked Vlad if they should turn back to find Luke, but he was of the mindset that there was no option for them to turn back. However, they weren't expecting their next obstacle to be Shah Rijan herself. Vlad attempted to move towards her, but she told him to halt, because only her descendants were allowed to pass through. Beilu was confused. Didn't her great-grandmother disappear? And Vlad confirmed that was correct. She disappeared so no one would see she'd become an Umbra. Rijan made an offer. Vlad hands over Beilu, and she would come back to the Twilights. Rijan knew time had stopped since the moment Vlad lost her. She spoke sweet words to him, telling him she'd stay by his side this time. Vlad admitted he waited 100 years wishing to be reunited with her. He didn't know what to do with the immortal body he had, until he found Beilu. Even though he found her to be immature, noisy, and rash, her soul was overflowing with hope, so he refused Rijan's offer. Rijan got battle ready, making Vlad chuckle, because it was clear she was a poor imitation of his old master. There's no way the real Rijan would show contempt for her beloved great-granddaughter. Beilu thought Vlad loved Rijan so much it was infuriating, but she was going to leave fighting her to him, while she went ahead. Vlad quickly dealt with the fake Rijan and threw his phone at one of the Umbra, so Wayne could possess it. That way, Beilu wouldn't be alone when she trekked forward. Haishin then appeared, so now Vlad had to deal with a real opponent. As the two began their hand-to-hand combat, Beilu became confronted with Mu, who was completely brainwashed. She tried to convince Mu to come back with her, but Mu could only see her as Jack the Ripper. Mu began her assault, but Wayne pushed Beilu out just in time. Coming out from a crate above, Van Helsing made his return, and this was not in Backup's plans. Van kept dodging Mu's attacks because he'd never seriously hurt a human. He ran up the tower catching up to Backup, and scolded him for trying to control people. However, with Mu appearing right behind Van, as she attacked, he covered Backup attempting to protect him. But really only ended up getting the both of them killed with Mu's piercing strikes. Backup screamed in agony because he didn't want to die, but no matter what, he wasn't going to snap Mu out of her trance. With Mu powering up and unleashing some of her stored Umbra, Beilu started powering up, relying on the full power of her ring. Vlad was surprised that Haishin's technique was so good, but that would make sense because Haishin reveals himself to be the one who taught Rijan as her older brother. His aim is to strengthen Beilu and eat her liver to gain immortality. He had done it to a few magic users in the past, which was how he's prolonged his life for the last 100 years, but they were of a poorer quality, and not related to him. Heishin threw several talismans, summoning an amalgamation of a creature to fight for him. Seeing Beilu, Chris told Mu she was a destructive hellfire that needed to be saved. Mu was losing her mind, attacking sporadically while Beilu dodged. This gave Wayne time to head up the tower to hopefully find the device that could release Mu from being possessed. Van, who was still barely hanging on, pointed Wayne towards Backup's terminal, where he needed to hack it to save Mu. With Vlad on the losing end versus Heishin, Toryu appeared and fired a rocket. Then, Chris appeared with Luke as well. Luke had actually saved the both of them nearing their end. The boys wanted to take Heishin on though, and leave Vlad to helping Beilu and Mu out. Beilu continued to cut apart Mu's tendril-like appendages, coming right at her neck, but having to run away, not delivering the finishing blow. At the same time, Wayne got into the terminal, but needed 30 minutes to shut down the controlling application. He just needed Beilu to destroy the chip on the back of Mu's neck. Vlad then came to the rescue, walking forward getting ensnared by Mu. As he was pulled into being absorbed, Beilu screamed out for him, but there was nothing she could do. Continuing the battle with Heishin, the three boys finally did enough damage to expend his life force. Having absorbed Vlad, Mu began going for Beilu, but suddenly started getting slashed apart. This was due to Vlad, and he came out perfectly fine, albeit exhausted. He even got the chip off of her, freeing her mind. But now, all the Umbra was spilling out of Mu, and Vlad was out of commission for the time being, so it was up to Beilu to handle the rest. She then delivered one decisive blow, eliminating all of the Umbra. Heishin tried making his escape, having shaved 50 years off of his life from the fight he was just in, but he became distraught, seeing the Lord of Gluttony. Heishin began laughing, knowing he'd met his end, as he was cut apart. The Lord of Gluttony then appeared on the scene where Beilu and Mu were exhausted. He was hungry, seeing two delicious snacks of power in front of him. With a few more seconds of consciousness left though, he let Vlad choose whose powers he should eat, so Vlad told him to eat Mu, to release her from the curse of her unwanted power. Vlad then grabbed onto Beilu, telling her to come back to Cafe Forbidden, telling her to come back to him. Beilu then told him if she stopped being human, if he wanted, she would be his, and then passed out as Vlad moved in for a bite. With the world now being saved, the Twilights continued their usual work at the cafe, where Detective Gregory and Mu frequented. When Beilu arrived, Vlad was happy, but then turned to scold her for being 20 minutes late for work. She wondered why he was nagging her. Her class ran late is all. While the two bickered, the rest of the crew saw pictures of Chris visiting Rome. He was traveling around the world, trying to figure out what he wanted to do. On another day, Beilu was running in a hurry because she was late for class. She stopped by a little girl, who claimed to have gotten lost looking for her aunt. Beilu then offered the girl a card for the cafe, telling her the guys there would help her out if she needed it, and then continued running to class. The little girl waved, while wishing Beilu a happy life as her other self. What a nice end to the series. But come on, no kisses anywhere? Subscribe to the channel for more. Also, watch this next video. It's me, Comfy T. I'll see you all in the next one. Elise de Clorence, after you were crowned queen, you were envious of your people's worth and ability, harboring evil intentions. You committed a monstrous crime. You have been sentenced to death by fire. Dr. Song Ji-shun awakens from a nightmare where she was set ablaze. Only this nightmare was reality, a reality in a far distant past and a different life. She's on flight to Germany until turbulence hits, and the captain announces to everyone that the plane has taken damage and can no longer sustain flight. Everyone is in fear as they must descend for an emergency landing. The engine explodes and the people scream in panic as the plane descends. The screams intensify with people begging someone to help, but no one can come for them on this crashing plane. And all Dr. Song can think of is, am I gonna die here? This time, I wanted to be sure I lived a life with no regrets. No, more than anything, I plan to save so many more. Dr. Song was incredibly skilled, taking on surgeries and performing feats that others simply could not reach. Known by her peers as the kind-hearted surgeon queen, and also having doctors' handwriting so bad no one else could make it out. But her skill set should never be taken lightly. as she's always in the know about the latest medical technology and has never failed a single surgery. Even when getting introduced to newer, experienced doctors, they praise in awe at meeting the surgeon queen. She really enjoys sweets too, as she doesn't indulge in any vices like drinking or smoking. We only have one life, and this time, in this life, she wanted to live earnestly and face everything with sincerity. After dinner with her friends, Dr. Song was greeted by a young girl who was ecstatic to meet her. She thanked the doctor for saving her mother during a pancreatic surgery that everyone said was impossible to do. As the young girl began taking her leave, she mentioned,
Do you think these trees actually like me or no? I wouldn't think so. We're gonna visit a bunny today because our other bunnies got eaten, and we need a new one. And even though Katrina thought about, Katrina was the one who suggested it, which that isn't her name. And, that's just the first thing that came to mind because we joke about being the Empress of Russia, Catherine the Great. I also joke about her Katrina. Which is why that.
her mother had told her and her father she loved them dearly, and the words love lit up Dr. Song's eyes in a sad way, because she's never said those words or had anyone say them to her, because in her past life, the one she loved didn't love her back. Even worse, the man she loved announced in front of the people that as punishment for her crimes as Elise de Clorence, the evil Empress of Britia, she was to receive death by burning. But now, leading her second life as Song Ji-hyun, this time things will be different. After dinner, she begins packing for her trip to Germany, and when she spots a book on medical terminology, she gets nostalgic, remembering the times she was bullied for being an orphan. She didn't get the chance to experience love by a parent in this life, but she wasn't going to let the loneliness get her down. She had brought misery to everyone in her first life, but to atone for all the sins she committed as Elise de Clorence, she became a doctor and saved as many lives as she could, and brought happiness to as many people as she could. She was proud of herself and happy for having chosen to live this way. But sometimes she wondered if her family was here, would they be happy to see her this way? Despite the wicked person she was, her family was always kind to her. Her father, her mother, and her two older brothers. She still missed them dearly, even in this new life. Awakening from the plane crash, it seems she survived, but her eyes stared in horror at the lifeless passengers. Despite this, she steeled her resolve and went to her medical supplies. She then hears a boy cry out over his passed out mother and runs over to check on them, promising to save his mother from dying. She successfully patches up the mother, but then she hears a man aching in pain and sees a metal pipe lodged inside of him. She doesn't have a blade handy, so she cleanses some broken glass nearby and surgically repairs the man's abdomen. She then sees the sight of rescue helicopters arriving. Looks like everyone is going to survive, except she isn't, as the blood begins to pour out from below her waist, and we see a trail following her every step. It's no good. She's not gonna make it. Song falls out of the plane, wishing she could have seen her family one more time. Oh man, it looks like Palace has escaped his cage again. Wait, what's he doing here? This familiar place. A maid then comes in to tell the girl that, as of today, she's no longer confined to her room. As the girl stands silent, the maid asks, "Lady Elise?" And the girl stood in shock, seeing her face in the mirror. She was once again Elise de Clorence. Elise then asks the maid Mary if her family is at the dinner table right now, and they are. She doesn't know why this happened, but her mother, her father, her brothers Chris and Len, she was in tears over how desperately she missed them. After telling her family how much she loved and missed them, they stared at her in visible shock. Her mother scolded the father for punishing her too severely. Her brother Chris consoled her, telling Elise that a lady awaiting her betrothal shouldn't cry in front of others. Upon hearing about her engagement, she had something to say, but her father cuts her off, telling her that her engagement to Crown Prince Lyndon de Romanov will be formally announced at the Emperor's birthday celebration. However, her eldest brother Len protests Elise even being a good match for the prince, realizing it's insolent of him to question the decision that their emperor has made, but he truly opposes their betrothal. Elise smiles, because hearing Len's sharp tongue is nostalgic. but she agrees with this statement, as her first life was full of regrets because of her own actions. But it was her selfishness that caused the crown prince so much misfortune. She must ensure the same mistakes don't happen again. Recollecting all the events that lead to her demise, she recounts that her brother, Chris, dies in the Kusef campaign. Their stepmother, Emily, dies of illness. Then the rebellion of the House of Treston. For the crime of protecting Empress Elise, her father and brother Len are then executed, and with that, the House of Clarence is extinguished. The initial expeditionary force to Kusef dies of an unknown contagious disease, with an estimated fatality count of 47,000 people. Emperor Minchester de Romanov dies of a chronic illness. Then after the Kusef War, an epidemic spreads eastward with an estimated fatality of 70,000 people. Elise sighed because medical science isn't advanced in this era, yet so many problems come from illnesses. However, she cheers up when her maid Mary brings in some dessert. Mary gets a little flustered because she's never heard Lady Elise thank her, causing Elise to remember the wicked villainess that she was before, who got angry over the tiniest of things. And after she and her Prince Lyndon ascended the throne, she became the worst possible empress, until 10 years later, she was burned at the stake. Mary then suddenly breaks the tea kettle, and in trying to pick up the fragments, she cuts her finger. Elise examines it, and with a glimmering smile, tells Mary it'll be alright as long as they rinse the wound in water. And after that, she needs to wrap it in clean cloth in a way that'll keep the wound closed, demonstrating all the knowledge she gained during her life as a doctor. Mary thanked her with tears in her eyes, grateful to see her mistress care so much about her. And this reminded Elise of the young girl whose mother she saved. Now she is certain that she wants to live in this world as a doctor, but to do that, she knows tomorrow is going to be a battle. She presents herself in front of Emperor Minchester, who is happy to see her again, with his first guard, Bent, standing beside him. As the king chattered, Elise was reminded of how kind their emperor was, even back when she was a terrible person, and yet he would die right in front of her due to what she now knows as diabetes, leaving her with the final words saying, she should become a good and praiseworthy empress. The emperor notices Elise's demeanor to be different somehow, so she nervously sips tea, hoping not to give away she somehow lived a whole nother life. Sir Bent, however, thinks she's just nervous with the emperor's birthday coming around. She grabs her dress because she knows she needs to say something about his illness. However, Prince Lyndon, the only man she's ever loved, arrives at the tea party. He takes a seat, glances at her, then looks away. Elise remembers once being in love with his brusqueness as well. But when she tried to serve him, he would only dismiss her, saying he only married her under his father's orders, nothing more. However, she had never given up. She had been determined to get him to love her. Now looking back, she felt stupid for trying to force things. Lyndon apologizes for his late arrival, as his discussion with the Ministry of Finance over the Kusef campaign budget ran long. Elise expressed some concern about the expedition, so the king wanted to know her thoughts. From her past life, she knows the campaign will fail, a failure resulting in a war where her brother Chris loses his life. She wonders if she should tell them, because she doesn't want to look suspicious. But with the idea of Chris dying again, shaking her to her core, she explains there is a worst case scenario, where the kingdom of Moncel from the east will join in on the enemy's side. Elise breaks down a really long explanation about how their empire will get ambushed by some guerrilla warfare. And the king is shocked that not only does Elise understand battle tactics, but she's also got a firm grasp on the relations in other countries. He finds her counsel impressive, but feels exhausted, because lately he tires easily and feels ill. She learns that he's got all the symptoms. Tired even after long periods of sleep, feeling thirsty no matter how much he drinks. The urge to urinate often wakes him up. She's now certain the disease he died from was diabetes. The emperor questions how she knows so much about what ails him, and she answers that she once read it in a medical text, that these sickly conditions were caused by high concentration of sugar in the blood. The emperor takes her input and will bring it to his personal doctor, Viscount Ben, which makes Elise glad because she's confident the Viscount will figure it out. So now that that issue has been solved, she now has to deal with Lyndon. She announces to everyone at the table she would like to annul her engagement to Prince Lyndon. Her father gets up, confused at what is happening, but the emperor has him hold it, as he wants to know what has changed, since Elise was the one who wished more than anything to be engaged to his son. She then responds that being the crown princess, she would become the first lady of the empire and an important ruler. She feels too inexperienced and unfit for the position. Elise then gets on her knees, begging for forgiveness for desiring more than she deserves. Bowing, ready to accept any punishment they would deal her. But the king has her raise her head, and for her to tell him the real reason. So she answers that she wants to be a doctor, showing a determined look in her eyes. The king felt her desire, especially thinking when she demonstrated her knowledge of the medical text from earlier. So he decides to make a wager with her. If she passes the exams and becomes a doctor, proving her work as a doctor is more valuable than her existence as the empress, then she can choose whatever path she desires. But if she can't prove herself, then she must put all her thoughts and energy towards becoming their future empress. She has until she comes of age, the next 6 months. It's a difficult gamble, but she's willing to take it on, something that no one was expecting. Afterwards, the Emperor has Elise and Lyndon take a stroll through the garden, since it's been so long since they've seen each other. As they walk, Lyndon asks why she took on such a gambit, as being a doctor is highly specialized and even with a noble rank, she'd be given no special treatment during the exams. However, Elise is aware and refuses to give up. Lyndon stares at her, shining, with her saying she's ready to give it her all to save as many lives as possible. And this even surprises and flusters him a bit. Elise then apologizes for everything, especially for always causing him trouble. Ever since they were small, she had forced him into an engagement he never wanted. But he simply answered, "Who said that I didn't want this engagement?" Which is something she wasn't expecting to hear, staring at him face to face. Back with the Emperor, Duke Clarence apologizes for his daughter's behavior, but the Emperor tells him there's no need to apologize. She's matured so wonderfully, it's even surprised him. We turn back to Elise, still apologizing for everything, saying she won't get in his way anymore, and she knows that he hates her. However, he just looks at the petal on her head, taking it off and walking away without a word. She could tell he was angry, but she knew this time walking a different path would be the best for the both of them. She wants Lyndon's life to be a happy one, because he's the one she loves the most. The next day, Elise is assigned to the Teresa Hospital owned by her family. She'll be working under a doctor named Graham, the youngest instructor who's also considered a genius. Elise will also go by Rose, so she won't be recognized as the Duke's daughter, but instead as a student who was recommended by a Viscount. Her father asks why she's hiding the fact that she's from their family, but she knows if they learn she's from the Clarence family, she'll be given special treatment. Chris isn't too happy with his younger sister being assigned to a relief hospital for the poor, so he'll be sneaking in from time to time to see how she is, but she tells both Chris and her father not to worry. Just like you shouldn't worry about missing my videos if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Here at My Shoujo Weekly, you'll find plenty of other villainous anime like this one. If that's something you like, I can for sure handle. You don't need a medical degree to subscribe to my channel. Eventually, she arrives at Teresa Hospital, knowing she must earn her license as quickly as possible and win this wager against the Emperor. We hear Graham de Fallon, annoyed for having to work with the young Rose. If she's even 1 minute late for their 10 o'clock appointment, he plans to toss her out. She arrives right on time, and Graham immediately judges her, as she has the appearance of a typical noblewoman. Graham then begins evaluating her resume. She's not old enough to have graduated from the academy, so how has she been studying medicine? She explains she's self-taught, which makes Graham chuckle over hearing such a ridiculous statement, just furthering his annoyment because if this weren't a request from Viscount Kate, he'd throw her out right now. He questions her on the purpose of healing arts and what she would do if a patient lost their life while undergoing treatment. She confidently answers, being a doctor is about treating and curing patients. Then, with her eyes closed solemnly, she tells them she'd carve their death into her heart. This gets Dr. Graham's eyes to widen. To him, it's as if she's a doctor who's faced patients' deaths many times. He then takes her to work with patients who have severe illnesses and no family left. This is a ward where patients who are beyond the primary hospital's aid stay in. Elise then asks if she'll be treating their underlying conditions or alleviating their symptoms through conservative treatments, surprising Dr. Graham again because she's asking the perfect questions. He wonders if it's just coincidence. He leaves her to her own devices and thinks it might be cruel to place her there, but if she's going to quit anyway, it's better to make her realize it sooner, thinking she'll only last a few days at most. The people in the ward stare in awe at Elise because she looks just like a little princess. She begins cleaning the ward as better hygiene can reduce overall mortality. So she continues to clean and mop up the place. The maids even start to help as no one has ever cleaned this ward before. But afterwards, we see it sparkling clean. We then take notice of a man groaning in pain. He had suffered injury from falling off of a roof he was fixing. Elise decides to lay him over for examination and notices realizes he's been lying down so long he's developed bed sores. Elise tells the maids to take him to the treatment room because if he's left like this, his back may get infected and that would lead to blood poisoning. She then asks for a disinfectant solution, anesthetic, and a scalpel, and the maids are shocked to hear Elise is going to perform surgery. Elise suits up, knowing Dr. Graham will probably scold her later, but she can't stand aside while the patient's condition is worsening. With the skill set from her life as Dr. Song Ji-hyun, the surgery queen, she removes the patient's dead skin with ease and completes a successful surgery. The next day, everyone cheers at the recovery the injured man has made. He tears up a little because he was just so happy at how he was treated. Whenever he showed any anxiety, Miss Rose would always reassure him it was gonna be alright. She tells him she didn't do anything special. That's just what any doctor should do. The men then all begin fighting over who Elise is going to treat next, so she tries to calm them down because she's going to treat them all. Over at the Emperor's palace, Sir Bent is getting pissed because Viscount Ben has no idea how to treat the Emperor's worsening conditions. Prince Linden mentions Elise's words about the symptoms of diabetes. This leaves Ben perplexed. There was a small presentation given in another nation with fewer than 20 people who know about this disease, so they send Ben off to research more detail. Afterwards, the Emperor asks his son how the Kusef campaign is going. Linden reports that what Elise had mentioned before was right, and that a third enemy nation, Moncel, seemed to be preparing for an ambush against them, which was verified by their intelligence bureau. The Emperor then sighs with relief, knowing Elise has saved their empire. The head doctor is pissed at Graham because he left Rose to independent study when she was referred by Viscount Kate. He then gets ordered to go watch after her and heads to the ward begrudgingly. However, he's surprised to find it sparkling, his mind blown, wondering if he came to the wrong room. He tries to wake Rose up, but the happy patients tell Graham not to, because she's been working so hard she hasn't slept. Even the maids think of her as so admirable. She cleaned, she examined, and her treatments were to perfection. However, upon hearing the word treatment, Elise began to wake up to a pretty angry Dr. Graham, now knowing she was in for a scolding. Dr. Graham checked the first patient, surprised to find on his back the buildup of fluid and pus gone, with the opening of the wound completely clean. Elise reported the severe bed sores the patient had developed, and with the risk of infection, she excised the necrotic tissue. With complete skepticism, Graham asked which doctors helped her, but she confirms it was a solo job. This makes him laugh, causing her to sadden a little at his lack of belief. However, the patient confirms she did his operation on her own. So, Dr. Graham decides to test Rose. He asks the name of this patient's illness. She answers bacterial pneumonia, given the viscous phlegm and increasing inflammation that was found during the exam. And upon hearing her answer, he simply has her return to her ward. Graham sat at his desk, pondering everything. He deliberately had Rose examine patients with difficult cases, but somehow she answered correctly every time, like a veteran doctor. He kept wondering how this young girl who had never attended the academy came off as so experienced. Is she perhaps a genius? The patients she looked after were all abandoned by the hospital, but were now happy and getting healthier by the day. Graham had wondered if he had been in her place, would he have been able to do what she did? No. Is there any doctor in the world who could do what she did? He actually smiled, looking at the joy she brought. He then invites her to a little creek. He's ready to admit defeat. He apologizes to Rose for allowing his own prejudices to see her as a nuisance. He completely judged her appearance. He holds out his hand for her to shake and blushes, while letting her know this is to seal their vow as teacher and student. And with that, the two vow to work together to save lives. Back in his office, Viscount Ben confirms the symptoms Emperor Minchester mentioned, confirming the illness to 100% be diabetes. This left him to ponder, however, which doctor would have mentioned this. He had asked many of the brightest from the Imperial Cross Hospital, but not a single one of them had referenced His Majesty's illness. Knowing whoever mentioned the information to the Emperor must be brilliant, Ben gets frustrated wondering who it is. Back in the Emperor's quarters, Prince Linden delivers the news that Ben is preparing his father's treatment. The Emperor is grateful to Elise. Now, it's not just the country she's saved, but also his life as well. He feels if Lady Elise were to become Empress, Britia Empire would surely be secured under her leadership. But is conflicted, because if she has the talent for medicine, would it be better for her to be a doctor? Emperor Minchester then commands his son to go inspect the Pierre territory, where Teresa Hospital is. That way, he can ascertain how Elise is doing with his own eyes. Dr. Graham introduces Rose to his apprentice doctors. They're astonished to see such a young noblewoman here working at the hospital. With Graham having to go to a meeting, he leaves Hans in charge of showing her around. But Hans feels nervous about her, misjudging Rose as a girl who might faint at the sight of blood. Hans shows her around until a nurse comes to them, saying there's a patient in need. It's a man with chest pains who is having trouble breathing. Hans orders a nurse to bring an electric cardiac defibrillator and Dr. Graham. However, Elise knows this is the wrong call. There's no time to run tests on his heart. He'll die before Graham even arrives. Elise gloves up and gets a stethoscope. Examining the patient, she notices the sound of breathing on his left side growing weaker. His jugular vein was overly swollen with blood. This is definitely tension pneumothorax. Too much air is escaping into his chest and putting pressure on the heart, causing the man to go into shock. Elise then has the assistants bring disinfectant solution and an injection needle. After wiping down the man's chest, she pierces it with the needle to alleviate the pent-up air pressure. And with that, the man is finally able to breathe, leaving Hans shocked out of his mind over what he just saw. Graham makes it in to hear Elise's explanation. Air was escaping the patient's thoracic cavity, putting pressure on his lungs and heart, so she used the needle to release the trapped air. And with that, Graham understood exactly the treatment she was going for. He congratulated Rose, as tension pneumothorax could have led to death if it was not treated immediately. Hans was only surprised even more, because he knew Dr. Graham was famous for never complimenting anyone. The rest of the doctors behind Graham were impressed as well, excited to pick Rose's brain, and this only confirmed to Graham that she is a true genius. Everyone in the hospital...
Look at that Siamese cat. Look at that Siamese cat. Look at how cute it is. Look at that raccoon.
Began speaking in hushed whispers about Rose, the young noblewoman who looks like she was raised in a beautiful, happy, sheltered life, but was somehow able to perform difficult procedures that saved the lives of others. But regardless, Elise couldn't ignore a patient right in front of her. Even Hans is boasting about it to his peers, blushing when his friend mentions he's smitten over Rose and her talents. He even suggests Hans ask her out to the festival. Hans agrees to the idea since, with the festival only happening once a year, it wouldn't seem weird for him to take her out. On second thought, he doesn't feel he's a good match for her sparkling aura at all, but who wouldn't fall for her after watching her skill and resolve? After hearing Rose's report on dealing with a patient who dislocated their arm, he thinks of her not only as a genius in medical arts, but someone who's mastered them. I mean, it's as if she was reincarnated with the skills of a god-tier doctor from another world. Even Graham catches himself in a daze, distracted from his thoughts of Rose. They hear cheers outside, and Dr. Graham remembers today is the day of the festival. It only happens once a year, so it's something everyone in town goes to enjoy. He tells Rose she should enjoy it instead of working any overtime, and she responds by thanking him and giving him a warm smile, which causes Graham to blush and look away. A nurse then suddenly barges in to tell them a patient was just admitted with a serious injury. Before them is a patient named Randall with a serious bullet wound. Graham tells Randall's friend saving him will be difficult, since the bullet passed through his spleen. He then apologizes because there's nothing he can do to save him. Completely distraught, Randall's friend then pulls out the crest of the Imperial family, demanding any method to be used to save his friend. However, Graham only looks down with remorse, because there is no method in the entire empire for treating a pierced spleen. As Graham begins to decline again, Elise interjects, saying they will take on the task. The blonde man stares in shock, seeing her here, because it's secretly Prince Lyndon in disguise. While visiting the town where the festival was going on, Lyndon's guard, Randall, noticed Lyndon seemed unrested lately. However, it's not just lately. Lyndon has felt unrested for the last 15 years, since the death of his mother. He used his imperial magic to disguise himself. They toured the festival to get a good inspection of the town. They then headed down a dark alleyway, as it was the fastest method to reach Teresa Hospital, until a robber came threatening them to hand over their belongings. The robber went in for a strike, but Randall disarmed him with a single stroke. However, Randall wasn't prepared for the gun that the assailant had in case. Lyndon is shocked to hear Elise is so adamant to handle Randall's injury, since she just came to the hospital. Graham tells her it isn't possible with how severe the wound is. But again, she's confident, telling him they'll just remove his spleen. Then it came to Graham. There'd be no need to stop the bleeding within the spleen if they just remove it and tie off the blood vessels. They can stop the hemorrhaging. Such a simple idea, yet no one has ever done it before. To Graham, the idea is revolutionary. Graham asks her who should perform this, since it's beyond even his current...
Wait, no, Come here. Come back. Come back. Come back. I'm sorry. It's canon. My bird avian has married a sheep avian. Oh, come here. Wait, there's lapis here? Holy sh... You'll never know how much ore there is until you check how much ore there is. Goddamn.
But both him and Lyndon are flabbergasted to hear Rose, the newbie apprentice, desire to take on a surgery this difficult. But she's confident that she'll save Randall. They need a third assistant, however, and with everyone else busy, Lyndon offers to help. As Lyndon watches Elise perform the surgery, he remembered when his father first announced his engagement to her. For the longest time, he thought that he didn't care about who he was engaged to, but seeing how she is now, could he be falling for her? The surgery ended in success. Lyndon, under the alias of Ron, thanked Elise for saving Randall. He then began to get up to take his leave, but Elise noticed he was pale, so she wanted to check on his temperature, but he pulled away, getting flustered, making excuses for why he couldn't get checked. He eventually ended up bringing Randall home to recover. Back at the hospital, Elise handed over her report from the surgery, and Graham was surprised at how bad her handwriting was. Viscount Ben got a hold of the report, excited to explain the miraculous, never-before-seen splenectomy. However, the head doctor from Teresa Hospital in front of him disregards it as a lie, saying the surgery simply isn't possible. But Viscount Ben claps back, because this very surgery was done at the hospital the head doctor is from, leaving him to believe it must have been Graham who performed it. One of the nurses comes in, as Graham has been called for by the director to explain Randall's surgery, so he takes Elise with him as they head to the director's office. While sifting through books, Lyndon falls and Len luckily is there to catch him. Len suggests that if the prince is unwell, he should go visit the hospital, but when the prince responds there's no need to because it's just mild dizziness, he remembers Elise saying it could be a symptom of something else. When Graham and Elise enter the director's office, she notices Viscount Ben. However, when the director dismisses her as a new assistant, Ben thinks nothing more than the girl looks familiar. Not good for Elise. Ben has been performing her medical exams since she was little, but she thinks it's not possible for the wicked villainess to ever become a doctor's apprentice, and just chalks up the resemblance to Elise as uncanny. Ben then asks Graham how he performed the surgery. However, he of course gives all the credit to Rose. The director grows tired of hearing such a fabricated story, since she's in this world completely new to medicine. But she confirms the claims, saying she's always wanted to become a doctor. She studied the basis of modern medicine in this era, and her excuse for how she knew the surgery would work was that she had always been searching for better treatment methods. But of course, she can't tell them she was a god-level doctor in a previous life. The director asks if she came up with the splenectomy procedure all on her own. She did, and she even explains exactly what happened and how to do the surgery. The director still can't believe what he's hearing. This is preposterous. However, Viscount Ben is more than ecstatic, even offering her to come work with him at the Imperial Cross Hospital. After all, he just wants to see her techniques in person. The Imperial Cross Hospital is the Empire's greatest medical institution. However, to work there, she'll need to pass a medical examination, which Emperor Minchester is having Ben bump up the difficulty this year. The director thinks there's no way she'd pass. However, Graham believes she will. He thinks of Rose as a true genius who possesses greater abilities than any doctor he's ever met. He's even willing to humble himself and say that she's better than him. So with that and Rose's confidence, she's able to get letters of recommendation from the three of them to take the medical exams. While divining the hospital, Elise thinks back to when her engagement was announced at the Emperor's birthday. Back then, this villainess believed a happy future awaited her, but the person she loved never loved her in return. She had never seen Lyndon smile once, but this time, her announcement won't happen since she's chosen a different path. Ron comes to visit, and the two lock eyes, staring silently for a bit. He at first says he didn't come for any reason, and tries to walk off, but Elise stops him, knowing he came back for the treatment she suggested. In her office, she asks probing questions to determine what ails him. He at first thinks he's wasting his time, since the doctor at the Imperial Cross couldn't even determine his ailment. She then suddenly grabs his hand to check his temperature, and that's certainly making his face red hot. She notices his hand is a little cold, so she decides to check his neck next, not making the situation of his heart any better. He wonders if she's like this with her other patients. She then determines that he has subacute thyroiditis, The thyroid is where thyroid hormone, which regulates our body's fuel, is created. When the gland is inflamed, it'll produce less of the temperature-regulating hormone. But it's easily solvable by just taking some medicine. But even with him taking it, she'll need him to return in 3 days, and for him to visit regularly over the next 2 months. That way she can check his condition and adjust dosages if needed. So they periodically meet for Ron's treatments, until their final visit, where she tells him he's all good now, and he almost looks disappointed that he's done being sick, since he won't be seeing her anymore. However, while working in his office, feeling better than ever, he looks out his window and heads to the hospital back in his Ron disguise to find excuses to hang around Elise. After all, he can't tell her directly that he just wanted to see her face. He helps carry her water bucket and offers to help clean the hospital. However, he's never cleaned before in his life, so she offers to teach him. They get close, scrubbing together. When they finish, Elise thanks him for all the help, and she catches his heart again. He's a little saddened to hear her call him Ron, but is now just discovering how beautiful her smile is. That night, back in Lyndon's office, Glenn asks where he's been going lately, leaving the mountain of accumulated work behind. But all Lyndon wants to know is what Elise likes, as he wants to show her his gratitude. So Len explains she likes strawberry cake, mango pudding, banana tarts, hates milk, but that's not what the prince was looking for at all. He wants to give her something worth gifting to a lady, but I thought treats were pretty good. Lyndon quickly figures out this conversation is going nowhere, since Len is someone who's always serious about working, until Lynn suggests jewels, as his sister has always liked dazzling, gaudy things. But even so, for some reason, how she currently is, Lyndon can't imagine her liking jewels the same way. He tries presenting a jewel to her, but she says, no thank you. He tries telling her it's a gift for saving Randall the other day. However, she can't accept it, as she only did what a doctor should do. But Ron still feels he cannot rest easy until he's repaid his debt to her. But Elise feels the medical fee was enough. However, Lynn was right. She wants strawberry cake, except her family won't let her eat it too often. Then, Lyndon mentions she likes mango pudding, banana tarts, and that she hates milk. But she wonders how he knows that. Lyndon just smiles, telling her from now on, she'll let her eat as much as she wants. From the bottom of his heart, he wants to bring joy to this woman he's fallen for. At the palace, the Emperor asks the director about how Rose fares at the hospital, and the director confirms beyond a shadow of a doubt she's a genius, as if she were born to become a doctor. The director then takes his leave. Sir Bent expresses that no matter what, Elise must become the Empress and serve the Empire. He was the one who suggested the medical exam's difficulty be raised to make it hard for her to pass. He also suggests the Emperor announce Elise's engagement to Lyndon at his party, even though the Emperor had promised to wait for their wager to finish. But Bent has an important plan to enact, as we see Elise cheerfully working at the Teresa Hospital. The day to celebrate Emperor Minchester's birthday has come, with the people cheering "Long live the Romanovs" and "Long live Britia." At the palace, Elise de Clarence arrives with her family to witness a huge gathering of those looking to honor the magnanimous emperor. As the Clarence family walks through, the people comment on Elise's beauty and splendor, except for one woman who isn't too happy. The festivities commence, and Elise finds herself all alone amongst the crowd, even though the rest of her family seems to fit in just fine. But the only thing that's bothering her is that she wants to go home to study, with the physician's exam date approaching soon. Unfortunately for her though, attending the Emperor's birthday celebration is a duty for noble family members. She then becomes alerted that he might be here too, Mikhail. In her first life, he was her only friend. Even though her husband Lyndon would anger her with his lack of acknowledgement, Mikhail would always comfort her. Clashes with other countries aren't the only conflict in the Empire. There's the imperial family's faction, which is led by her father, Duke Clarence, and the opposing nobles faction, which supports the third prince, led by the House of Child. In a pretentious tone, we hear Julian the Child say, "It's been some time, hasn't it, Lady Clarence?" Elise remembers now that since their families are from opposing factions, the two had never gotten along, always having fought like cats and dogs. But the biggest reason they clashed being they both had passionate feelings for Crown Prince Lyndon. Thinking back on it though, there was really no good reason for the two of them to fight. Julian gets in Elise's face, asking why she's in a daze. So Elise makes an excuse that she was just remembering a few things from the past, because of course, she can't explain she was both reincarnated and isekai with all her memories from her previous timeline. Julian wonders if Elise was thinking about the time she had put a frog in her desk, or maybe at last year's feast, when Elise threw Julian's shoes into a pond, or maybe when Elise accidentally spilled tea all over Julian because she saw a bug. Wait, why did the Emperor and Bent choose her to be Empress again? Now remembering just how horrible she was to Julian, Elise apologized with a deep sense of remorse. But the sight of Elise bowing really threw Julian off, making her wonder where this was coming from or if it was some kind of prank. However, Elise, with her head lowered, tells Julian this is no prank. She's realized how bad her behavior has been. Julian breathes a sigh and tells Elise to raise her head, even giving somewhat of an endearing look. She mentions Elise seems different somehow. They then hear one of the knights announce the arrival of Crown Prince Lyndon, and the people are surprised he's here on time since the prince isn't fond of celebrations. Lyndon looks amongst the crowd until he spots Elise, and she wonders if he's looking at her. No. In her mind, there's no way he could ever be looking in her direction. However, Julian, with hands on her heart and a face flushed, believes the prince to be staring at her. She then starts to fall over, as if just being overdramatic. But Elise checks her head and can tell she actually has a terrible fever. Elise asks Julian to lie down. However, Julian reminds her that it's a noble's duty to attend the Emperor's birthday celebration, but also she wouldn't trade her time near the prince for anything in the world. Elise knows that, unfortunately, because of Julian's political position, there's a chasm between her and the prince deeper than between Romeo and Juliet. But even with her family leading the enemy faction, Julian still cares deeply for the prince. Julian as a person is both earnest and noble, someone that Elise believes would be worthy of being crowned princess and eventually the empress. Chris suddenly appears to tell Elise she shouldn't be interacting with the daughter of the child house and takes her away, all while onlookers gawk at Elise. Something that pisses Lyndon off. Len picks up on Lyndon's sudden displeasure, but he denies anything being wrong. Len keeps pressing on the matter, which makes Lyndon wonder if being dense runs in their family. Lyndon then spots Elise watching Julian get pulled away, and comes to the conclusion that Elise must be interested in dancing. However, she's actually just worried about Julian falling apart since she's sick. However, he's not the only man who wants to get close to Elise, as a few boys swarm around her for their chance to dance. Elise knows refusing without a particular reason would be considered disrespectful, so she reluctantly goes to accept one of them for a dance, but Lyndon comes in to stop it, and asks her to dance, stealing her right in front of them, something she wasn't expecting. As they move on the floor, Elise asks Lyndon why he invited her to dance, since he'd never really given her much consideration before. She has no idea he was patient Ron during his previous visits, or how his feelings had changed, so when he answered it was just on a whim, in her mind, she gets disappointed because, of course, His Highness would never actually want to dance with her. All this while he's getting shy and telling her he's glad to have helped her get away from those guys. And the people stare and comment about how the two move so perfectly together. They heard that the prince's fiancé is supposed to be announced today, and came to the conclusion, yes, it must be Elise. Elise remembers in the past where she had to practice feverishly to keep up with the prince's lead during dance. The first time she had danced with Lyndon, not being able to follow his lead was both embarrassing and frustrating to her. She would often practice so much that her feet would swell all the time. She felt it ironic that she finally used those skills today. Her mind then wanders back to the state of Julian Child, concerned for her health. Lyndon picks up on that she keeps looking at Julian, so he dances while slowly inching over towards Julian and her dance partner. After Julian finishes her dance, she begins to collapse and Elise catches her, scolding her for pushing herself too far even though she has a fever, telling her to go home and rest. But Julian refuses because being absent from the Emperor's birthday celebration would cause damage to her family's honor. So, Lyndon interjects to tell the girls to come with him, and Julian gets so excited to follow her crush. Lyndon leads the two to the lounge where the Imperial family normally rests, but Julian doesn't want to impose. However, Lyndon explains that if it's a noble's duty to attend birthday celebrations, then it's the Imperial family's duty to help them when in need. Julian takes her rest, and outside the door, Elise tells Lyndon she'd like to
We're filling in the fucking cubicles with dirt so I can plant more trees. This is my tree farm. I need trees. Oh, we can leave that one. There we so.
Stay with Julian because she wants to look after her. Lyndon remarks that Elise seems to be like that with everyone, and his comment makes her a little puzzled on what he means, but he just takes off without explaining anything. Elise checks Julian's condition, and good news, she seems to be breathing more evenly. Then a woman comes in to alert them that it's time for Emperor Minchester's celebratory address. Elise remembers this older woman. She's Duchess Harbour, who's from a great noble house in the west that's blood related to the imperial family. The Duchess tells Elise she should head to the hall, but when her legs begin aching, Elise catches on to the pain the Duchess is experiencing. As Duchess Harbour leaves, Elise suspects she could have Parkinson's disease, a disease where nerve cells begin to degenerate and cause decreased motor function throughout the body. In her past life, she remembers the Duchess losing her life when food becomes lodged in her respiratory tract. However, the time to deal with that isn't now, because Julian has awakened. Elise escorts her to the hall, commenting that it's wonderful they'll be able to make it back in time for the Emperor's address. Julian must be so resilient because of her good daily habits. Julian gets a little flushed and thanks Elise for everything, but Elise's kind heart genuinely thinks nothing of it. She was just doing all she could. Things are sure different than Elise's past life, because Julian would love to get together with her for tea sometime. The people wait in anticipation as Emperor Minchester arrives, and he praises them for their incredible loyalty and all that kingly stuff. But getting to the meat of things, he has an important announcement. In regards to Lyndon's fiancée, he regrettably informs the people the lady they have chosen is not of age yet. And Elise stares nervously as she's in disbelief that they'd announced her engagement with Lyndon with her wager against the Emperor still going. The Emperor explains to the people that while there's nothing wrong with this lady not being of age yet, he does have a personal promise to them, and so the official announcement will come after Elise has come of age. The people begin to talk after hearing the sound of Elise's name. She has no idea what's going on, or why the Emperor would say her name to everyone. I mean, what's the point of this in not just officially announcing their betrothal? Julian certainly looks crushed though. But with that, Emperor Minchester tells everyone to continue enjoying the festivities and takes his leave. Julian nearly faints again, but is luckily caught by Prince Mikhail, who tells her to keep his appearance quiet as he's here secretly. With a devious tone, he remarks, "So, that's the girl who will become my big brother's fiancé, is it?" All while Elise freaks out, having PTSD over the terror she experienced in her first life, standing depressed, knowing she may suffer the same fate all over again with her engagement to Lyndon basically announced. As Minchester and Bent walk together, Minchester tells him to bring Elise, and feels bad for making her go through this ordeal, but he wants to answer any questions she might have. The Emperor and Elise sit across from each other, with Elise sulking. She wonders what happened to their wager, a wager that was to last until she came of age. She should still have time. Minchester confirms the wager is definitely still on, which gets her staring in surprise. But the kind Emperor wouldn't break any promises. That's why there's no formal announcement, so if Elise wins, he can still withdraw what he said. Elise is concerned for the Emperor's reputation. However, Bent assures her there's nothing to worry about. However, he doubts she'll be able to achieve proving her value as a doctor will ever exceed her value as an empress. Minchester thinks of Elise as if she's his own daughter. He respects her determination, but in truth, he wants her to marry and support Lyndon, which is
Well, shit.
part of the reason why he announced things this way. She wonders why the Emperor cares for her so dearly. Is it because her father is an important friend to him? Or because of how she acted the other day? However, she can only stare in shock. Emperor Minchester remarks, "This country has many outstanding doctors, doesn't it? But you are the only one who can become its empress." Elise looks saddened as the Emperor has her weigh the importance of becoming empress more than becoming a doctor. He reminds her she can be with his son like she always wanted, and they can dance all they want as gracefully as they did earlier. He pleads her to reconsider. She knows the gravity of what the king is saying, but even so, she still has no intention of ending the wager here. Pallas watches Elise as she continues to study diligently for the medical exam. Her brother Chris enters her room to check on her, and even with her best efforts, Chris thinks she's pushing herself too hard, especially knowing the birthday celebrations are still continuing tomorrow. He urges her to sleep because she'll have an early morning tomorrow. But even though she's serious about continuing, Chris is just as serious about her sleeping. The next day at the festivities, Elise gets surrounded by several nobles congratulating her on her engagement to Prince Lyndon, but she isn't too excited about it. She looks up to check for Julian, asking the others about her, but no one has seen Lady Child. Elise knows with Julian being in love with Lyndon, the announcement must have surprised her. I think that's more than surprising, knowing the two of you had just become friends. But Elise feels remorse and wants to explain things properly to Julian. We suddenly hear silverware drop to the ground, a man calling for a doctor, a woman had fallen. It's Duchess Harbour, the woman that Elise assessed to have Parkinson's disease. Elise runs over, noticing the Duchess choking with the food lodged in her throat. Elise collects herself, rationally thinking about her next move. She tries to awaken the Duchess, only to see she's fallen unconscious and exhibiting cyanosis, a bluish discoloration of the skin resulting from the inadequate oxygenation of her blood. Elise starts to perform the Heimlich maneuver, but it just isn't working, so there's only one method for her to use. Luckily, Elise always carries alcohol-based antiseptic with her at all times, usually to prevent infections. She takes a dining knife and pours the antiseptic over it. Someone shouts at Elise, asking what she's doing, but she beckons no one to interfere, so that the Duchess has a chance to survive. She points the blade, promising everyone she can save the Duchess. She plans to make an incision on the neck to secure an airway, a task that must be done within 30 seconds. She locks in and cuts. Good. She can barely see the food lodged in. She takes a straw and plants it in the Duchess's neck, now allowing her to breathe, even knocked out. Elise is relieved everything worked out. However, everyone is staring, flabbergasted. She knows there isn't any precedent of performing a tracheectomy in this world, so this is likely to become a serious matter. The knights come over to escort Elise for interrogation. She accepts, however, she wants them to also deliver a message. Because this was urgent, she didn't have the chance to move Duchess Harbour over to an operating room for this treatment. So, disinfection wasn't performed under ideal circumstances, meaning there is still risk of infection. She needs the staff at Imperial Cross Hospital to disinfect the Duchess's neck again. The knights could only react to the strange amount of knowledge leaving Elise's lips, but they accepted her request. They then escort her out, and we see Prince Mikhail was observing her the entire time. Sir Bent reports that Duchess Harbour was saved from death's door, and the king acknowledges they must once again give their thanks to Elise. For now, though, she's been placed in the Hundreds household, as they don't want to put her in a jail cell, but she needs to be placed somewhere. Bent is concerned about the outcome of this, because Elise's reputation as a doctor will certainly increase. Well, of course it would. She saved someone who is part of the imperial family, which would, unfortunately for them, support public opinion for her to become a doctor. Sir Bent suggests they counter this by having someone find flaw in the way Elise performed the procedure, especially using an eating utensil to cut. That way, they can confine Elise to the Hundreds house, making her unable to take the medical exams. The Emperor condones this plan and offers Bent to summon their nation's finest doctors in hopes of finding this flaw. In the Hundreds house, Chris shouts at Elise, scolding her for the brash actions she took. And even though she apologizes, Chris doesn't believe her because she cut the Duchess's neck, something that would have normally put her in prison. Chris asks her if something like this would happen again, what would she do? Well, as our Dr. Villainous, if there's a patient in front of her, she will save them. Chris is ready to scold her further, making Elise a little scared. However, Len approaches more tactfully, saying he and Chris understand she acted in a way to save the Duchess, and that anyone would praise her for giving medical treatment as an act of bravery. But Chris won't stop his scolding screams, saying that saving the Duchess isn't a good enough reason to endanger herself. With Chris scolding her and Len praising her, this seems to be the opposite of how things would normally turn out for Elise. Elise continues her medical exam studies into the night, getting exhausted over all the texts she still needs to read. She eventually falls to her desk into a slumber. She dreams about a time Mikhail had something to tell her, but never got his words out, only saying for her to take care of herself as he disappeared. And we see her crying in her sleep, uttering the words, "No, please, you can't die." As we see, it was Prince Lyndon who tucked her in. He had heard she was taken into custody, so he came to check on her, but wonders what kind of dream she could be having to cry like this. She turns over in tears, and he thinks, "Don't cry. When I see you suffering, I don't know why, but something in my chest tightens. A pain enough to make him break his vow to never return to this tower of blood." He wipes Elise's tears and wishes for her to dream of pleasant things. But as he takes his leave, we see Mikhail deviously saying he's never seen his older brother like this. Mikhail watches her from afar, noting the interest his brother has taken in her, thinking it's time for him to go tease her a little. With Elise lost in thought, Mikhail suddenly appears to ask what she's reading. She jolts in surprise, and Prince Mikhail apologizes, especially since this is the first time they've spoken. He introduces himself as the third prince, Mikhail de Romanov, but wonders if he should have shown himself, since he's Lyndon's political rival. He wonders what she'll do, if she's dumbfounded in shock. However, he's in more shock to see Elise crying, saying, "Mil, is that really you?" He wonders how she could know his nickname. She apologizes, saying not to mind her, and formally introduces herself. Mikhail doesn't understand, but when seeing Elise, he senses a sorrow within her eyes. He takes his leave, but he'll see her around, since he's also locked in here for stealing some of his father's drinks during the birthday celebration. So he's being confined to reflect on his actions. But Elise doesn't buy that he feels sorry at all. In Minchester's throne room, he has Viscount Ben and Dr. Graham give their reports, with the Emperor and Bent astonished to hear Elise's surgery to be perfection. Ben claims he was excited to see this treatment that was so dangerous. No one had been able to test it, but Elise's medical skills seem to transcend above all current medical professionals in the nation. Emperor Minchester wonders if this was just a fluke. However, Ben was only more excited to say after reading her medical report that the positioning and method of the incision was optimal and described very precisely, all while Minchester and Bent are losing it. As Viscount Ben tells the two her work needs to be published as a treatise to advance the current level of medical science. Minchester thinks Ben is off his rocker, so he asks Graham's opinion on this, only for him to confirm Elise is an absolute genius, something he'd willingly stake his reputation on. The Emperor can tell he's lost, so he orders Ben to release the girl, with Ben getting even more excited because he's been allowed to speak with her about her skill set. We see Elise continuing her studies, only for Mikhail to barge in. He's bored because he wants someone to play with, and when he picks up her complicated book, she explains she needs to pass her medical exam and become a doctor. Mikhail remarks that with her becoming a doctor, she wouldn't marry his brother, would she? And with a hint of sadness, she simply answers she has no intention of marrying Lyndon. So with that, Mikhail invites her for sweets, something that Elise gulps at because there's no way she can turn them down. But alas, she's too busy studying. Mikhail supposes she can't hang with him, so she bashfully tells him, okay, just for a little while. They enjoy a variety of sweets and drinks that Mikhail stole from his father. Elise scolds him, saying it isn't good for him to steal, because if he keeps doing that, he'll never be able to leave this place. He smoothly replies, if that means living here with you, Lise, then it wouldn't be so bad. But Elise brushes this off, since he says that to all the girls he speaks to. Then he laughs with embarrassment, wondering whatever does she mean? Oh man, he's a total playboy. The two then have a toast, and this brings back memories for Elise. They used to toast like this all the time in her first life, but unfortunately, she wasn't able to prevent his death. She knows with he and Lyndon both being princes, only one can become emperor, and that the pursuit of the throne is ultimately what will kill Mikhail. Mikhail asks her what's wrong, since she always looks sad looking at him. It's like she's experienced this all before, which gets Elise shocked hearing him say that, but he just laughs because it was a joke. He notes that she seems different, especially casting aside the position of empress to become a doctor. He asks if she hates Lyndon. She assures him she doesn't, then asks Mikhail about his sword skills, even knowing he's traveled to other countries to train as a warrior. Mikhail says the rumors are true, and doesn't believe anyone can best him in swordsmanship. So she asks why he trained in the way of the sword, since as an imperial family member, he shouldn't need to defend himself. So he kindly answers, it's because he loves swordsmanship. This is the same for Elise in becoming a doctor. At first, she chose it to atone for the mistakes of her first life, but now she wants to spend her entire life carrying out the work of a doctor. Even knowing Emperor Minchester wants her to marry Lyndon and become empress, if she were forced into that path, she'd be a bird locked in a cage, unable to pursue her passions. This is why she must win her wager. After she knocks out, Mikhail carries her to bed and tucks her in. He sighs because if he was Lyndon, he'd treat Elise with much more care. He gives her a light kiss on the forehead and takes his leave for the night.
Ayo, bro, ayo! Well, hello, Scholar. How are you doing? Oh, you doing good? Great. Don't ask questions. That is definitely my wife. Who's definitely Guys, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. My character, I don't have any problems.
As he has to be somewhere tomorrow. The next day, Viscount Ben and Graham arrive at the Hundred's house, and Graham thinks, based on the report he read, Elise's abilities must be equal to Rose's. Uh-oh, I just remembered those two don't know Elise's Rose yet. Elise awakens to hear a knock on the door, and those two are surprised to see Rose here, with Elise at a loss for words. With Dr. Graham and Viscount Ben surprised to see her, Elise apologizes for concealing her identity. Ben knew she looked just like Elise, but never imagined she was actually the same girl he'd known all along. Ben explains they arrived after clearing up the misunderstanding with the procedure that was done to Duchess Harbor. He helped to dispel that the tracheotomy was not an act of disrespect towards the imperial family, and instead claims she should celebrate her incredible achievement. But she maintains a somber look, especially seeing Dr. Graham not looking her way at all. And things would only get more awkward, because while examining a patient together, Dr. Graham seems to only speak to her with formality. She tries to tell him he can speak to her in the way he always did before. However, he declines because she is in a much higher position than him. Upon opening her report, Graham makes a disconcerting look, which makes Elise wonder if he's angry with her for concealing her identity. He sighs, putting down her report, only furthering Elise's sadness. She'd like to explain her situation to him. After all, he's the only one here at Teresa Hospital who knows she's from the Clarence family. In the office area, Hans tells Elise he's looking forward to working with her, as Dr. Graham left work this morning. The next day, Elise looks for Dr. Graham, but it seems no one has seen him at all. During lunchtime, she enjoys some sandwiches and looks out towards the other doctors. She grows sad again, unable to find Graham. She learns from Hans there's a rumor that Graham requested leave and will be absent from the hospital for a while. He remarks Graham seemed a little unusual when he had left, and that even though he learns a lot from Elise, he loses a lot of motivation without Graham there to yell at him. Now, Elise is certain this is all her fault. She decides to take matters into her own hands and gets dropped off in front of Graham's house. The nursemaid, Yodel, kindly welcomes Rose in, and inside, Elise marvels at all the medical texts Graham had read through and studied. She could tell Graham worked very hard. Yodel serves Elise tea and explains she tried calling Graham down, but he wouldn't come. He's been locked in his room for days now. Elise assures her that Graham applied for leave appropriately, so things are still fine at the hospital without him for now. This makes Yodel feel better that he's not causing trouble, but also she's excited to hear from an outsider what Graham is like at the hospital. Elise explains that everyone adores Graham. His directions are always exact, making all the apprentice doctors go to him for help first. Yodel was relieved to hear that, because growing up, Graham cried many nights. So much it was difficult to help him fall asleep, but given the way he is now, Elise really can't imagine that at all. Yodel gets up because she forgot to bring out snacks. She stumbles a bit, and even with Elise's concern, Yodel says she's fine, it's just that she's getting old. But it wasn't fine, as we hear the serving tray drop on the floor. Elise catches the woman, and when Yodel passes out, Elise calls out for Graham, who leaves his study to see his beloved maid passed out. With the carriage on the way to the hospital, Graham tries to figure out what happened to her. He asks his maid where she was hurting, and Elise picked up that she showed signs of pain in her abdomen. Elise then began to examine and notice swelling in her groin area. It's hard and won't push backwards. It's an incarcerated inguinal hernia. With the current symptoms, she tells Graham necrosis of the intestine may have already begun. If not treated immediately, it'll cause intestinal perforation and inflammation of the abdominal lining, putting her life at risk. With Yodel calling out to Graham in pain, he's determined to do the surgery with Elise's help. They begin a surgery to repair inguinal hernia and complete it successfully without any problems. Graham is a little exhausted and wants to rest a little now, so Elise offers to write up the report. Elise transcribes their operation, which included, after making an incision in the upper section of the hernia, they looked for a change in the color of the intestines, and observed the blood flow. However, seeing Elise's handwriting, he stared in horror. He took the paper from her, saying he'll write it instead, seeing her terrible doctor's handwriting. While he works on the report, he asks why Elise was at his house today. She tells him she came to apologize because he seemed angry that she concealed her identity, and she was worried that he left for days because of it. Graham simply responded, "Angry?" with a quizzical tone. "Well, yes," Elise conveyed, showing the expression he made with his eyebrows drawn together, while he had concurrently sighed heavily. Oh, it all made sense now. He was just shocked at her handwriting because it's so bad, it takes a long time to read, making making her gasp in embarrassment. He explains he simply took time off to focus on his research, and that she was the reason he felt the push to do so. Elise always works her hardest. He recalled the hospital ward he had first assigned her to. Even within the hospital, that ward was known as one of the cruelest places, with the sight of the filthy conditions. He was certain that Elise was going to run away, but she didn't, hiding her identity while aiming to become a doctor. Studying on her own to learn medical science, he understood neither of these paths were easy, so he wanted to learn that strength from her. Elise tries to assure him what she's doing isn't so grand. However, he elaborates further that her skills are so sound. When she treated that one patient with the tension pneumothorax, the splenectomy, and even the tracheotomy she performed the other day are all things only she could have done. Graham acknowledges his shortcomings, even though he studied so hard at the academy, even having read all the medical texts over and over. Everyone says he has a talent for medicine, however, he feels no more than an average person who works his hardest. He sees Elise as someone born with talent, something that he's jealous of, and with a smile, he tells her he truly feels envy and respect towards her. Elise asks him why he decided to become a physician. He pauses slightly and closes his eyes and tells her it was because he had lost his family. 20 years ago, he had his parents, an older brother, an older sister, and also an adorable little brother. They would spend time playing together and traveling. He remembered every day with his family to be a happy one, until one day they were taken away due to illness. 150,000 people died in the La Rage epidemic. His family had been infected too, and when they were on the verge of death, he wasn't even allowed to sit by their sides. With his family gone, he couldn't afford to pay for any of his maids or caretakers. The disease had stolen everything he held dear. But even being a ruined noble, the only person to hold out their hand to him was Yodel. They became like family. There was a time she had fallen ill and he had nursed her back to health. This is when he had thought to never let disease steal anything precious to him ever again. His losses and his precious remaining family gave him determination to become a doctor. After hearing his story, Elise found herself with a deep newfound respect for Graham and his moral compass. The two walked outside to the sight of the beautiful stars. However, he couldn't take his sight off the glimmering Elise, but when she noticed, he turned away. And walking in the halls on a different day, his thoughts of Elise actually made him blush, making him wonder why he feels so embarrassed. Back at the Clarence Manor, Elise sneaks her way upstairs, only to be joyously greeted by her brother Chris, who tells her she's going to be awarded the Order of the Imperial Rose due to her tracheotomy operation on Duchess Harbor. Later, Yodel wakes up to Graham sitting beside her. He blames himself for not noticing her condition sooner, but asks her to tell him whenever she's not feeling well. Hans peeks in, making Graham ask what he's standing around for. So Hans replies he's happy to be on regular routine, as he hasn't been scolded by Graham for a few days now, which had made him feel a little empty. But Graham doesn't really get what he means by that. The doctors pile in to get Graham's consultation on other matters, and when Graham takes his leave, Yodel smiles, remembering a young Graham crying over his losses, and mourning his family, when he had nursed her when she was bedridden, bringing her a 4-leaf clover for good luck, when he began studying medicine, and the late nights she would put a blanket on him to keep him warm, and when she stood beside him at his graduation, proud of the man he's become. Thunder strikes and rain falls, as we see Julian riding in a carriage, staring at a book containing Elise's face on it. It seems that for the first time in history of the Empire, a woman will be awarded the Order of the Imperial Rose. However, the carriage makes a sudden stop, and outside, Julian runs to Elise, who is perfectly fine, just a little startled. But the driver had flown off in order to avoid hitting Elise, meaning Dr. Villainous is on the job. As the rain pours madly, Elise assesses the man to have a broken bone. Oh shoot, she doesn't have a splint, so Julian offers to use her umbrella as one. Elise is at first concerned for Julian because she'd be getting wet now, but Julian thinks nothing of it, with Elise willing to get muddy in the rain. After bringing the carriage driver Daniel back to the child house to recover, Julian says she'll make arrangements for him to visit the doctor tomorrow. Elise then sneezes, making Julian concerned for Elise's well-being. Elise tries to leave because she doesn't want to impose, but with the thunder raining heavily, Julian tells her to stay over for the night. And now after bathing, Elise never imagined staying over at the child estate, since their houses don't really get along. Julian brings over some ginger tea, which she had started drinking since that time she was sick at the Emperor's birthday celebration. The warmth and improved blood flow generally increases the body's immunity. Hearing that from Julian made Elise excited. Could it be that Julian had been studying medicine recently? Julian confirms she had been studying because she was a little jealous of Elise. It seems everyone is watching Elise, so her every move is being reported on. There are even magazines with special collections of her on them. She then congratulates Elise on receiving the Order of the Imperial Rose, and also being awarded an honorary knighthood. Right now, Elise is walking a precipitous path that no one else has managed. Where Elise
be
walks,
back
so many new hopes will spring amongst the footsteps. This all made Julian so jealous. She tried to copy Elise in the hopes of becoming somewhat like her. Elise knew it. Julian's heart was broken by her engagement announcement. Because the Child family is a part of the Nobles faction, her family and the Crown Prince are enemies. There would never be a chance for Julian and the Crown Prince to be together. Elise touches Julian's hand in order to console her. This reminds Julian that Elise has so many wonderful qualities, while she herself felt inadequate. But she stops herself to tell Elise she has a bedroom readied, and they can now both rest for the evening. The next day, Julian finds herself treating Elise. After reading 39 degrees Celsius on a thermometer, it's clear Elise has a high fever. Julian then gets a report that her brother has returned, so she has to go talk with him. In his office, Albert asks why Elise is in their household. Julian explains the situation, which relieves Albert because it would have been bad if they had actually hurt someone from the Clorence house. When he tells Julian they need to get Elise out as soon as possible, Julian responds only as soon as Elise gets better, leaving him to question if Julian is going to become friends with their house's direct political enemies. Back where Elise is staying, Dr. Kyle assesses her to, of course, have a cold. So he prescribes some medicine for Elise. However, Elise is only worried about carriage driver Daniel. The doctor tells her it's fine because of Elise's treatment. Daniel should recover in the next 3 to 4 weeks. But Elise won't take all the credit, as she gives some to Julian for holding down the splint while she tied it. The two ladies then smile at each other, which surprises the doctor, as he'd never think to see Julian being friendly with Elise. He now thinks Elise may change more than just the medical world. Julian cares for Elise, wiping off her sweat and braiding her hair. Elise is happy to receive her care, and tells Julian she's very kind, and Julian makes her feel at ease from the bottom of her heart, causing Julian to gasp and blush. She's never been told she was kind before. When someone's done something wrong or something she can't accept, she's always scolded them. That's just Julian's personality. The two girls bond on how they're both stubborn and hate losing, which makes Julian remind Elise of her old self. One time, Julian was taking her leave, and Elise stepped on her dress, making her trip, and mocked Julian for being so unsightly. Or that time Elise was sprinkling pepper into Julian's tea, where upon sipping, she began coughing badly while Elise mocked her. Julian had received so much childish harassment, she really hated Elise from the bottom of her heart, making Elise saddened with a remorseful look. But Julian says it's different now, and she really respects Elise. Elsewhere, the Nobles faction meets to discuss Elise de Clorence, the woman who's garnered tremendous support from the people. With her current feats, the entire empire is watching, especially after her being announced as the unofficial crown princess. As a consequence, this has made Prince Lyndon's approval ratings much higher, where previously the people preferred Prince Mikhail much more. And to them, if Lyndon ascends the throne, they know Lyndon will remove them. He'd never forgive them for what happened to his mother that rainy day. Mikhail, who had been silent the entire meeting, knows at least 3 who will die. His mother, his uncle, and himself as well. Back at the Child Manor, Elise and Julian enjoy sweets together. Elise then decides to empathize when Julian said she had nothing, remembering the time she was reincarnated as Song Ji-hyun, an orphan with absolutely nothing. But because she didn't have anything, she devoted everything she had to improving herself. Elise then tells her it's the people with nothing who can become the strongest. Julian warmly smiles, but pouts knowing Elise is trying to comfort her, and now she's confirming Julian has nothing. Elise gets so flustered because she didn't mean that, and she gets tea on the dress she borrowed from Julian. She promises to clean it and give it back, making Julian tease her for having to fulfill a second promise. The two laugh, and to end their time, Julian promises to do Elise's hair on the day she received the Order of the Imperial Rose. Back at Elise's home, her father shows concern after hearing she spent the night at the child house, but was surprised to hear she was treated very well. Chris loses it after hearing Julian the child had been taking care of her, and the brother and father only grow further in disbelief upon hearing Elise is actually friends with Julian now, all while Elise snacks on the sweets Julian gave to her. Wow, what a sweet ending to this episode. It's another day, and Randall has returned to serve Lyndon. She's decided to live her
Don't worry,
life
that was just
as
my
a
laugh.
doctor.
It's just
I
my
guess
laugh.
her
My laugh
desires
is
are
very
real,
loud.
because even on her day off, she accidentally wanders to Teresa Hospital, where even Hans is questioning what she's doing here. After waving her goodbyes, she sighs. Now determined to give herself a proper change of pace today, she's gonna go get some sweets, aka Lyndon in disguise. He's come because he heard she got sick, and wants to know if she's better now. But, she'd ask like any normal person, how does he know that? He just plainly responds, I heard it from someone. And she believes it without a second thought. After learning Elise has the day off, Ron tells her he came to see her. This surprises Elise, but Ron tells her he hoped to repay his debt for helping him today. Strawberry cake, mango pudding, banana tart, he'll buy anything she likes. And this makes Elise smile. The two sit in the carriage together, and on the way to a luxurious cafe, Elise notes that Ron isn't very talkative. She gets a glance at his face, noticing his features are quite beautiful, making her blush. After all, it's a little rude to stare. She feels strange as this atmosphere feels familiar to her. Inside the high-end Cafe La, the two enjoy a splendor of this wink wink. On Elise's first bite of the treats, she's completely elated. However, Lyndon gets a serious look on his face, thinking he needs to give her more. He makes Lyndon ponder what excuse he can use to get to talk to him. The two don't normally interact, maybe with all these puzzling thoughts flooding Lyndon's mind on how to find out what Elise likes. She stares at him, noticing he seems deep in thought. Afterwards, the two walk to town, with Elise exclaiming Cafe La's strawberry tart to be the most delicious tart she's ever eaten. She tells Ron that if he ate one, she'd be certain it'd satisfy his taste. So he smoothly replies, being able to see that face of yours satisfies me well enough. Ooh. Tells him, it's nothing, all while repeating to herself over and over, it's gratitude. He treated me out of gratitude. There's no deeper meaning. She then spots a poster for a play, a very popular one, the talk of the town. Lyndon catches on to this and asks if she wants to see it. She says she's fine. He doesn't have to force himself to see it for her sake. But nothing is stopping this man from giving this woman everything. He tells her he wants to see this play, and she responds, really? Thinking this play is incredibly interactive. Breathes in the smoke, he may get carbon monoxide poisoning. As the other spectators come out, Elise beckons them to get low and to try not to breathe in the smoke. The noblemen holler back, saying, who is she to give them orders? They believe with the fire having started downstairs, there's no way it'd reach up here, and that they just need to wait for rescue at the real him. At the palace, Elise is bestowed with the Order of the Imperial Rose for performing a great service to the imperial family, having saved Duchess Harbour. With everyone cheering, Minchester steps up to grant her the noble rank of knight. This is the first time in their history a woman has been awarded, and by the same lady chosen by Prince Lyndon, no less. The people crowd around Elise, hoping to chat and gain her favor. Having heard she also used to do volunteer work at a hospital, people are truly banking that she'll be a wise crown princess. But she sighs, having to deal with all these formalities. She spots the Emperor and remembers when he asked her to put an end to their wager. She knows if things keep going as is, she really will lose. But she can't give in. The physician's exam is in 2 days, so she's determined to become a doctor no matter what it takes. She has a toast with the Emperor, who congratulates her once again. He thinks of it to be a great day, with the sky blue and the music pleasant, and the people's faces filled with smiles. He'd love a day like this to continue forever. Elise gives a gentle smile, acknowledging him, thinking it's a lovely wish. Then Julian wants to chat with her, so she heads over. Lyndon then brings the Emperor a drink, and after this next glass, his chest starts throbbing and he coughs up blood. He's fallen, and Lyndon is distraught at the sight. Elise checks the Emperor to feel no pulse. He hasn't simply fainted. This is a heart attack. Elise then begins to resuscitate the Emperor, and is able to bring his pulse back. But his heart attack just happened, so they can't rest easy just yet. Systolic blood pressure 70, pulse rate 40, breaths 20. Elise is concerned he might have gone into severe shock. With the Emperor escorted out, people start to wonder why the Emperor had a heart attack so suddenly. Was it perhaps his chronic illness? Or poisoned by somebody, like Lyndon? The knights escort him out under suspicion. At the Imperial Cross Hospital, Elise watches, knowing if they don't alleviate the Emperor's state of shock quickly, he'll suffer negative after effects, giving her flashbacks of the day he died. She doesn't want to experience that ever again. She tells the nurse to monitor his transfusions closely, and that if his blood pressure drops or there's any change in his state of consciousness, to contact her right away. Elise noticed he didn't look well earlier, but diabetes isn't the sort of disease that causes a sudden heart attack. What could have caused this? In the palace meeting room, a man opens with regards to the failed attempt of the Emperor's poisoning. However, Elise's father slams the table saying there's no proof of poison, but they are having a hard time believing that it would be his chronic illness due to the clutching of his chest and coughing of blood, with half of the room believing Lyndon had something to do with it. But reports from Lady Elise came back with poison to be also unlikely. However, Mikhail's nobles don't trust her, as she's Crown Prince Lyndon's fiancée and part of the King faction. They claim her findings are affected by her own self-interest, even slamming her credibility since she's just an apprentice doctor, who's lacking the objectivity necessary for a precise diagnosis. Duke Lawrence can't back down though. If he does, Lyndon will lose his standing as Crown Prince. He brings up that according to law, charges of murder and attempted murder cannot be pursued based on circumstantial evidence alone. If the Crown Prince is to be accused of a crime, there must be clear evidence. Then, Mikhail tells them all to silence. With the Emperor out of commission and Lyndon currently in custody, the ultimate judicial power is currently held by Prince Mikhail. He agrees that it would be wrong to persecute his brother with no evidence, but if this goes long enough and they don't find some evidence, he will deem his brother the assailant. Outside the meeting room, some nobles discuss how they're going to overthrow Lyndon with the current situation. Marquise Ansel already arranged for a newspaper to publish an article. Now they only need to spread rumors about this amongst the commoners, that Crown Prince Lyndon poisoned the Emperor. Gossip is terrifying. Even without proof, rumors beget more rumors, and they begin to feel like the truth. Their goal is to bring public opinion to Prince Mikhail's faction. At the Court's residence, the King's faction discusses how the whole meeting was clearly planned. It's clear Lyndon has no reason to assassinate the Emperor. He's already Crown Prince. Right now, he's currently being held at the Hundred's house, treated as a criminal. They're worried that with no cause found, Mikhail's noble faction will succeed. The only thing they can bet on is Lady Elise. Back at the hospital, Dr. Graham reads the Emperor's systolic pressure at 85 and diastolic pressure at 40. It's gotten better, but still low. Elise still contemplates on the cause, knowing not many illnesses can cause shock like this, and if there was, it would be an illness she'd already know of. She considered the idea that the noble faction was framing Prince Lyndon by using poison, but she doesn't believe Mill would ever use such craven methods. But even then, there have been no changes in the Emperor's body that indicate poison, and in the examination of his heart and x-rays of his lungs, there were no abnormalities. This isn't a matter of her lacking technical ability. There must be something she's overlooking. Dr. Graham tells her she shouldn't continue like this. She hasn't slept at all since yesterday, or eaten much either. He warns her that even when her passion burned at its hottest, she always made logical, calm decisions and provided accurate, appropriate treatments. But right now, she's different. Not maintaining her health in a panic state. Can she truly see her patient? The Emperor is stable at the moment. Graham is here and so is Viscount Ben. With them being capable enough to handle it, he recommends Elise go outside and get some fresh air. Outside, Elise sits in disappointment that she so arrogantly declared herself to become a doctor no matter what, and yet can't even figure out how to save the life of someone so dear to her. A boy outside begins throwing news flyers, and Elise stares in horror with the paper framing Lyndon for the Emperor's poisoning. Over at the Hundred's house, Lyndon sits depressed, concerned for his father, but he's visited by Elise. He asks how his father's condition is, only to hear he's still not very good, with Elise trembling before him. Lyndon tries to comfort her, acknowledging that they're all doing everything they can. He begins to fall, however. He feels it's pathetic how he has absolutely no power right now. Back in his most traumatic time, and even now, he begins crying as he feels so pathetic. Elise goes to him, telling Lyndon his father will get better, and that she'll make sure of it. As she leaves, she considers looking into each possible cause one at a time, only to be stopped by a guard. The guard mentions the Emperor has fallen into severe shock again, and they'll get a carriage for her. However, the noblemen from Mikhail's faction appear. ready to end her life because they cannot let her near the Emperor. As they swing, she narrowly dodges and makes a run for it. She can't let them find her. Otherwise, what was coming back and living as Elise all for? She has to save Minchester. Unfortunately, one of them finds her and brings a blade down towards her end. But luckily, she's saved by Mikhail? It looks like he overheard his side of the faction talking and had a bad feeling, so he decided to follow Elise. Mikhail then disarms the noble. The two nobles plead to Mikhail for mercy as they were taking action for the noble's faction. They're okay with being the only two who have dirt on their hands, still implying Elise has to die. However, Mikhail guarantees if anyone harms Elise, they will be punished. Then suddenly, the men the two nobles hired attempt to attack because they want their reward. But Mikhail easily dispatches and pierces the men, taking them out, causing the two nobles to run away. Mikhail goes to console Elise. She still tells him she's fine, as she must go to the Emperor right away, surprising Mikhail with the strength of her resolve. Mikhail is a good guy. He genuinely wants Elise to save his father. Elise makes it to Minchester to hear he's not doing so well. She hears no problems with his lungs, but he's still in shock. They have to discover the cause soon, otherwise Minchester will die. She remembers back at the celebration, the Emperor had quite a bit of alcohol, but there were no illnesses she could think of that would cause this. However, it comes to her.